I don't know if you saw on KSL that about 10 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago, America's Freedom Festival down in Provo has been called off until next year.
Oh, really?
Yep. A modified fireworks program will be offered. It doesn't go into detail. Well, let me see what it says here.
I'm waiting to see if somebody's figured out how to do virtual fireworks.
I'm sure John could make that happen.
It's just me waving pom-poms in the air.
John, turn your camera on so we can see you.
Oh, I actually don't have a camera in my office.
I want to see those pom-poms. Yeah, it just says that they're going to have a modified fireworks show without a lot of detail with what's going on. And it says Stadium of Fire, the Grand Parade, Balloon Fest, Freedom Days, and all other Freedom Festival events previously scheduled to occur this summer are postponed till 2021.
That's what we should have said. We're not canceling this year, we're postponing it.
Yeah, I don't understand the wordplay that they're using there and why they feel it's necessary. Days of 47 did the same thing, and I don't know.
I wonder if they already paid some of their vendors, if they postpone it, then they can push the costs. So
That might be. Hadn't thought about that.
But it's kind of the same thing we've done with the fireworks, you know, because the fireworks company had ordered them. So we just kind of indicated, you know, we're hoping to hold the event next year. And that being the case, we would engage them to do the fireworks.
yeah.
Missing Councilwoman Stoker.
So how is everybody tonight?
Good, Blake.
Excellent. Excellent.
Doing
So
well.
Good.
Councilwoman Stoker said she might be a few minutes late.
Okay, well, tell us when you're ready to get started, John, and we'll move forward and hope Councilwoman Stoker can join us.
We are ready to go.
All right. Thanks for joining us this evening, council members, and hopefully we have some of the citizens with us tonight as we continue our trek on talking about our 2021 budget. Just a couple reminders for those who would like to participate from the citizens in our conversation this evening. As you sign in, we would ask that you sign in with your first and your last name. That will allow us to call on you. John Call is administering our meeting tonight. I just remind you that your comments are available by clicking the raise your hand button or by typing in a comment if you look at the chat part of your screen. That's if you're using a Zoom app. And John will open those up to be available during our public comments portion of the meeting. Once again, the meeting is being recorded and broadcasted on YouTube. And we would ask that everyone put their Zoom on mute until called upon. That'll limit the feedback that we're dealing with. And also, you can email council members at ccmm@nogden.org. And the council members will not be utilizing their chat feature to communicate back and forth with citizens, but as those chats come in, John Call will be reading those to the council and we can respond verbally. So with that, I understand Councilman Barker, you have taken on the responsibility of this evening's invocation and Pledge of Allegiance. So if everyone would go go ahead and prepare for that. We'll have an invocation, then we'll have Councilman Barker lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ryan?
Okay. Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for the opportunity to gather as a city and as a council and the mayor. We're grateful for the opportunity for this technology that we can all meet in our own homes or in our places of work, and that we can all correspond and communicate with each other. Please bless that we'll be able to have a good conversation tonight about our budget and about upcoming events. Please bless us with all that we need for our city at this time, and these things we say in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
All right, everyone stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and for justice for all.
Thank you, Councilman Barker. Muchly appreciated. We'll go to the first item on our agenda, which is public comments, and just would remind the public, if they do have comments, those could be limited to 5 minutes so that everyone has a chance to participate. So John, if you'd let us know if we have any public comments to start our meeting.
Okay, no, nobody yet. We've got 13 folks watching.
Okay, well, once again, we'll just give them a few minutes in case they have to, they want to type in a chat, or if they're figuring out how to raise their hand.
We have a raised hand from Bill Olson.
All right, Mr. Olson, would you give us your full name and address, please, and then give us your comments?
So he needs to hit unmute on his phone. Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes, Bill, we
Yeah.
can. Thank you.
Thank you. William Olson, 3626 King Hill Drive, North Ogden, Utah, 84414. I haven't sat in on one of these digital meetings, so in terms of public comments, I do have some questions when we get to the budget or the item of the police building or the budget. Do I wait to make comments then? Is that the key, or do I make them first part of the meeting?
You're welcome to make them wherever you'd like, William. If you'd like to make them, we will have comments as we discuss those issues on property tax and the budget, but you're welcome to make those comments now if you have concerns, and we'll try to address them.
Thank you. One concern I just wanted to bring up, in 2016, our county commissioners raised their property taxes approximately 23%. This was sold to us as designated to the sheriff's office and the sheriff employees. Instead, it ended up going to all the county employees. Now, I don't have a beef with who gets a raise or who doesn't, but it was sold to us to help the sheriff's department get their wages for their deputies competitive, to reduce training costs, etc. Well, the deputies did get a raise, but quite not big enough, but that tax increase was spread out through all county employees. So I guess my question or comment with respect to your consideration of the police building and the continued increased costs would be that, is there a way to guarantee us that if the property taxes are raised that much, it's going specifically to law enforcement? And then second, or lastly, I wanted to make sure that in your discussion, you could include what is actually in the building. And maybe I haven't done my research well enough, but is it a police building, holding cells? Does it include interview rooms or AV capabilities, war rooms, conference rooms, office space, Sallyport armor rooms? Will there be a new courthouse added? Where can I go to get this information if it's out there?
William, maybe I could give you some insight on that and then ask the council, particularly Councilman Swanson. We've had discussions about if there is the need to do that, to raise taxes, how we would go about that to assure the citizens that the money would be spent as we talk about with the public. At this point in time, here's the process. A committee of citizens was formulated to look at the potential of a new public safety building and to do a feasibility study on that. We have had some initial preliminary, I would say preliminary drawings. Those have not been finalized yet. But I would simply say this, that the initial submission of drawings was based upon a list of everything that was wanted. The council has not scrubbed that at this point in time, but as soon as we get the final, I hate to use final preliminary drawings, we will put those out on the city sites so citizens can see those. But prior to any final decision, those will be vetted through the public, through public meetings. They'll be scrubbed by the council. And you can be assured that the goal is to have a moderate building that will keep our public safety employees safe and meet the basic needs. We are not looking at any type of opulent building. So we will publish those. Our goal is to be totally transparent and vet that out with our citizens. Phil, I would ask you to address Mr. Olson's question on how the citizens, if there is a increase in property taxes for the purpose of funding public safety, how we might go about that to give the citizens some comfort that is just not a additional amount needed to spread across the city. And
Right. Bill, I really appreciate your question, especially given that it stemmed from what happened with the county back in 2016. That was a frustrating time. To answer a previous question, we're looking at things like sally ports, hard and soft interview rooms, detention cells, office space, those kinds of things that we are severely lacking now in the building that we have. So it's really to create a building that is functional according to modern standards as a functional, safe police department. The way that would be the most effective way to guarantee that the funds were dedicated to the police department would be to create a special service district. Not unsimilar to the Pineview fire. It wouldn't be a multi-city kind of setup, but it would be a special service district where any increase in taxes would occur in that special service district that is a public safety zone. And that way the funds could not be used for anything but public safety. It couldn't go into the general fund. It couldn't go anywhere but to the use of public safety. One of the things we're trying to accomplish is for probably our most critical essential service, that being public safety, to get to the point where we have a dedicated revenue stream so that that department is not affected by the ebbs and the flows of the economy and sales tax and those kinds of things. We need the same number of police officers regardless of what the economy is doing. And so that's kind of the overall goal that we're looking for, is to eventually get to that dedicated stream of revenue through that special service district, which then locks those funds in for public safety. Does that answer your question?
William, I think you went back on mute, but.
Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, yes, no, thank you for both of you for addressing the issues. One of my follow-up questions in terms of that special district, I would think that public safety should be somewhere involved in the budget. So as natural tax increases, cost of living, cost of growing increase, that they increase proportionally as well. I agree public safety is important regardless of whether we're quarantined or whether we're out living our lives. So as long as we can be sensitive to that and we can not live through the embarrassment and the frustration at the county level, it's important, I think, to all of us that public safety is a major issue, and we have a very safe town. I've been here 17 years as a transplant from the San Francisco Bay Area, and I've watched this town grow, and it's I thought your answers addressed it, and I think it's a matter of whether the process through the timeline addresses it.
One
Bill,
of the-
let me just maybe add one other thing. I've asked our city manager and director of finance to investigate what Phil talked about here. And that is how we would do that at the appropriate time. We surely need to look, I think, from a strategic standpoint on how public safety in our city has been financed over the years. Basically, at one point in time, and correct me, Councilman Swanson, if I'm wrong, that public safety was primarily, if not 100%, financed by property tax. Today, that number hovers below 50% of the funding for public safety comes from property tax. We need to have a strategic discussion amongst the citizens and the council on how we move forward in financing essential services in this city. Because as we all know, as Phil mentioned, the economy ebbs and flows. And that's what we're faced with right now is a potential major shortfall in sales tax because of what's going on. So I think as we have a strategic discussion about how we fund the city essential services going forward, what Phil mentioned with a special service district with a separate line item on your property tax bill may be one way to address that. But once again, as you'll notice tonight, there is nothing on the agenda about the public safety building. We're more than happy to discuss that. But as I've mentioned before, our concentration right now is kind of dealing on this year's budget on which we have a substantial deficit due to the lack of potential sales tax.
Mayor, may I add one thing?
Yes, Councilman Swanson.
Bill, one thing that I would add is that one of the protections with having a special service district to the residents is that if our general fund is sufficient and we're doing okay, and the only place that we need some additional revenues is for, say, a new police officer, then a small minor increase can be made in that special service district without affecting the general property tax rate. And so that it's a very small increase if it's necessary, specific for the police department, and then it's earmarked for that use.
And we could actually accomplish that through the general fund, but in the spirit of transparency and helping the citizens understand and be comfortable with what we would need to do, we have looked at that very seriously, as Councilman Swanson mentioned, with a special service district for public safety.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yes,
Bill?
yes, it does. Thank you, gentlemen. And I don't want to take up too much more time. One more thought in the process is, I've been looking into the demographics of Utah with respect to how we fund education locally at the state level and any tax funds we get back federally. And I was shocked and surprised at the demographics in terms of family sizes. 1 in every 5 citizen of the state of Utah is in public education. And so I would hope, and I'm sure you are, looking at the demographics and the changing needs of this community based on those demographics in terms of where the greatest portion of public safety is in jeopardy, and earmark funds and develop funding based on those kinds of issues. I'm sure you're doing that, but I just wanted to kind of get that out there.
Excellent comment, William. Really appreciate you joining us tonight and appreciate your interest in our city.
Thank you.
Can we help in any other way this evening?
No, sir. I'm going to mute and go finish cooking dinner for my 2 teenage daughters.
All right, good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. John, do we have any other comments from the public thus far?
No, we don't.
Okay, with that, let's move on to item 2 on our agenda. Councilman Swanson tonight will be leading a discussion to consider opening of the Aquatic Center. Councilman Swanson?
Thank you, Mayor. Tiffany, if you'll unmute at the same time so that we can get your input on these things, that would be awesome. Tiffany sent an email over I've asked her some questions as we change from red to orange and then eventually from orange to red, what the implications are for the pool. And with some additional restrictions and caveats that the health department has given specifically to pools. Tiffany mentioned that in last Tuesday's meeting that there were some additional guidelines coming out and we have received those. I think you've all had a chance to look at them. So what I'd like to do is just go through the questions that Tiffany has and that's related to parks and the aquatic centers. The first one is, when would City Council like to see the public restrooms opened to the public? They're scheduled to open on April 1st, but we delayed with the weather getting warmer, runners and cyclists and families out at the parks. When would we like to do that? They're cleaned daily, disinfected weekly. The disinfection would have to be increased to a minimum of daily at a minimum. So council, what are your thoughts?
Councilman Barker?
I have no problem with them opening now if we continue the daily and cleaning and sanitizing. Right now, there's porta potties up at almost each of the restrooms, so I don't see how those are any cleaner than what our restrooms would be. So I have no issue with this opening them now.
Any, Councilwoman Ekstrom?
Yeah, I just have a question. Are we okay on staff to be able to do the extra cleaning duties with that? Is that going to add any extra burden to them? Or are we okay and they can add the extra cleaning daily? Disinfecting, I guess, is really the issue, is getting that really kind of deep clean done on the regular, and just wondering about our staffing as far as that goes. And in addition, I would say that, yeah, if we do have the staff to do it, then let's open them.
Tiffany, any comments?
I think she's back. Sorry, we'd lost her for a sec.
You know, why Tiffany is reconnecting with us, I had a conversation with one of our county commissioners a couple hours ago. One of the things we need to be aware of and consistently check on, and this is a little bit weird, but they have not opened a lot of the restrooms in the county yet because they can't figure out how to stop people from stealing the toilet paper because of the shortage of toilet paper in the stores. And people are literally stealing soap and stealing toilet paper from the facilities because of the difficulty in finding them in stores or their inability to purchase those. So I think that's another issue we're going to have to consistently make sure that, you know, that's available for use. Are you with us, Tiffany?
I think she's having connection issues. I can tell you that in my conversations with Tiffany, we would need to bring on a couple more staff to do the type of cleaning that we need to. Currently, we've hired about half of the seasonal staff that we normally would, just trying to kind of delay and help with the budget. But we would probably need to add at least 2 more seasonal staff members to help clean bathrooms regularly.
Councilman Barker?
Well, if we need to hire more, what are we doing with the porta potties? Are we not cleaning those?
So we don't service the porta potties. We do, I believe we have been spraying them down, but it's not the type of cleaning that you typically get in a traditional brick building with, you know, several stalls and sinks and everything.
And I do believe that the expectation of cleanliness in public restrooms is dramatically increased because of the pandemic, but Tiffany could probably give us information on that. She seems to be back with us. Tiffany?
Huh. Yeah, she's not connecting there. I don't know what the issue is.
just call in. It shows she just took off her mute.
There she is.
Okay, hi, everybody.
Okay, Tiffany. In case you didn't hear us, we were talking about the additional staff and the requirements for cleanliness in public restrooms during the pandemic. Do you want to give council some insight on that from your perspective?
Yes, is this restrooms in the parks or at the aquatic center, or both?
They're probably
Right now, restrooms in the parks, yeah.
talking about parks right now.
Okay, so at the parks currently on a daily basis, we go in and we clean and we sanitize about once weekly. And so in order to open up those restrooms again, we would need to have someone sanitize at least once daily, spraying things down, making sure they're wiped down and cleaned and taken care of.
Tiffany, we talked about, in all seriousness, the ability to keep tissue paper in there and soap. A lot of people have not opened the restrooms because they've seen the theft of those things on a regular basis and the inability to keep those available to the citizens. How do you see us dealing with that?
Well, I think we would probably have to deal with it as it happened. If we saw it becoming a problem, we could close the restrooms again. Our mechanisms are only as good as the lock that's on them, and if they're broken and vandalized, someone could easily get to the toilet paper.
Councilman Swanson, any other questions or concerns before the council gives you their feedback?
No, not on the parks. I'm with Charlotte. I think if we can address the issues of cleanliness and Mayor, the issues of should they happen, hopefully it won't happen, but you never know with toilet paper being stolen and soap being drained. I like Tiffany's suggestion that at that point we could then close them back down. That's my feeling. I'm interested to hear what the rest of council has to say.
Okay, and the council is prepared to authorize the hiring of some additional staff, I assume. I think Tiffany has said that it would require additional staffing.
Tiffany, would that be 2 part-time seasonal employees?
Yes, it would probably take 2 part-time employees that would go, and they would do that throughout all of our restrooms.
Okay.
Councilman Severin, do you have any input?
I was just going to say, if it's only going to be 2 part-time seasonal staff members, I would agree with that. I think we open them up, we make a great effort at keeping them sanitized and stocked. And if things go south with people taking the toilet paper and the soap, we just close them back down.
Okay.
Well,
Well, I think you've got your answer there, Tiffany. It appears the council said open the restrooms, keep them sanitized and stocked. Phil?
All right, moving on to the
We'll get to work on that.
Okay, thank you.
moving on then to the aquatic center. In moving into the orange, there is some relaxation of some of the shutdown on pools. One of the things that we can do under the orange is that we can have lap swimming. It would be limited to 1 lap swimmer per lane at a time, and then social distancing requirements followed while the swimmers are on deck. General thoughts about that. Tiffany, orange, if I remember right, does not allow public swimming as a whole, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so we'd only be looking at in the orange while we're in the orange at lap swimming. The question is, do we want to open up the pool for lap swimming, and how much, how often, for how long?
Councilwoman Ekstrom, looks like you have a comment.
Well, just a question mostly. I don't know what our demand is for lap swimming. I don't know if we can open it up or what the cost is to actually open the pool on such a limited basis. Like, for instance, it has a set cost of, even if we don't let anybody in, the pool certainly has a certain cost, but then what is the incremental cost, the variable cost that comes in from opening it just on the lap pool? Like how many lifeguards are needed, and what kind of staffing do we need to have to actually purchase those times, and to actually administer the whole infrastructure around making the collection of the fees and whatnot. I'm just kind of looking at cost versus, I personally want to open up as many things as we can, right? I want to be able to offer as many amenities as we possibly can under the circumstances that it makes financial sense. So I kind of need to know how much money it's going to take to do that.
And Councilwoman Ekstrom, I think that's a good point as we consider what to do with the Aquatic Center. We know that at pretty much full capacity, there's an operational loss. So if we have to cut the capacity in half, and to your point, exclusive of lap swimming, the same theory applies. You would have to have pretty much the same number of lifeguards, staff, etc., for half the revenue. So I think your question has merit to it. And I don't know if Tiffany has that answer, but let's give her a chance to respond.
Yeah, I do. So when we open for lap swimming, we usually have 2 lifeguards on duty and 1 cashier. And I have those numbers put together. I'm just getting the document to open right now so I can take a look at it. I think you would be, I would actually have to look as far as per lane usage. So it would allow for 6 people to be in the pool. And when I talked with other facilities earlier today in a meeting, how they are running lap swimming is they are running a 45-minute block. So you pay to get in, you have 45 minutes, and then after 45 minutes, you need to exit the facility, and they use that time to wipe down and sanitize everything in between. For our facility per hour, lap swimming costs us about $53. That's before taxes and before insurance and things. But to run 2 cashiers, or 2 lifeguards, a cashier, and keep the facility open, it's about $53 an hour. So in order to break even on that, we'd need to bring in revenue-wise at least $53 an hour, and that could not be done with 1 person in each lap lane.
So if each lap was filled, did you say we have 6, Tiffany, 6 lap swimmers?
We do, yeah.
So about $10 a day per hour, if it's maximized at 6 swimmers. That just rounding, $9-10.
Yeah, each lap swimmer would pay about $9 to make it meet our cost per hour. But right now we're charging $3.50 for admissions for fitness programs. And a lot of the individuals who come on a frequent basis have a season pass, which includes their admission.
So is that something we could try, just the pricing model? Would people want to come swim enough to pay $10 for a 45-minute swim when, to have that premium, to be able to actually get in the pool and know that you have that lane for 45 minutes and nobody's going to bother you? Could we try it and see what kind of demand we get?
And that's if you have all 6 lanes
Yeah.
filled, right? If you only have 2.
That is, yep. We could try it. My concern is that you will completely price yourself out of any kind of market. I think at that price, we'll be willing to drive to other facilities who aren't increasing prices.
Tiffany, what would your recommendation be based on the data and the numbers and the market and everything else?
I think you have to look at it as what is your goal as a city council? If your focus is on making sure that this facility breaks even, I don't think it's wise to open for lap swimming at this point in time. But if your focus is to provide a service for the residents and have an opportunity for them to get out and exercise, then I think it does make sense.
Tiffany, you said that $53 was without taxes and insurance that we would need if we open the pool to insure again.
Yes.
So we pay insurance on the pool whether it's open or not. It's part of our general liability insurance for the city.
Okay.
So that's a fixed cost. So the, yeah, open or
Whether we
closed.
open or
we-
not.
yeah,
Meaning,
okay. You know, I'm kind of inclining to at least provide something, you know, I don't know. I would like to see something open, some possibility of recreation. And, you know, the incremental cost, again, to provide the service for that benefit, to at least have something to look forward to. I'm kind of willing to lean into it a little.
Well, I'm fine with that based upon pay to play. If people are willing to pay that, I think we'll find out very quickly if they are.
Tiffany, have we had very many people request details about what's happening with the pool for the summer?
yes, lots of people are inquiring whether we are going to open, what our plans are. And currently we've just told them that at this point, we're not opening until we've reached that green phase in the governor's plan.
Thank you.
All right, let's try to wrap the discussion up. Council, what do you want to do? Councilman Barker?
What happens to the pool when we switch from orange to yellow? Is lap swimming easier to put more people than one per lane?
Yes, it is. So lap swimming in yellow resumes normal capacity.
With social distancing, right? Even in
On the
yellow?
pool deck.
Well, I'm almost inclined to say let's wait until we get hit yellow to open up lap swimming. If we have to charge $10, $9 to $10 a person, I don't see many people using that. But I mean, I might be wrong, and maybe we need to try it. I don't know.
Well, Tiffany, is there a way you could get, we could send out a message for people to sign up if they're willing to pay $9 or $10, say $9 a day to lap swim and see what the demand is? Can we have a sign up out on the
Yes,
city page?
yeah, we could post something to Facebook and ask the public what their thoughts are. One question for you is how you would like us to handle those who have already purchased season passes that include fitness programs and lap swimming, because it won't increase the cost for them to attend lap swimming. But it would increase the cost. You know, if you increase it to $9, that's for people who decide to come without a season pass.
Tiffany, in your experience, are most of the lap swimmers season pass holders?
You know, I would have to look at that data. I think probably about half and half. I do have to say though that I don't think you will have anyone who will be willing to come at $9 or $10.
Mayor, my feelings right, as far as lap swimming go, I agree with Councilman Barker's initial statement that we wait until we're into the yellow where we can have multiple people in the lanes. I think it's hard as we are going through this budget and the discussions of a potential tax increase to ask the citizens to further subsidize the pool by opening it on such a limited basis. I'd rather wait till we're in the yellow where we can have swim lessons, lap swimming, and some limited, Tiffany, are we allowed to have a little bit of limited grouping under the yellow?
So for yellow, pools can be open for public swimming, but you have to maintain a capacity that enables a 6-foot social distance. So you
Right.
calculate your area and you determine what your capacity is based on that. You're also required in yellow to maintain that 6-foot social distance on the deck and in the pools. Lap swimming in yellow resumes to normal capacity, so we can have lap swimmers in there. We just require the distancing on the deck. Also in yellow, the swim team can be there and participate as long as they distance on the deck. Swimming lessons are permitted as long as social distancing happens on the deck. So most of this is things happen as normal as long as on the deck, and then for public swimming in the water, we make sure to space the furniture and to keep those family groups 6 feet or more apart from each other.
And I'll throw in my 2 cents worth here. I don't know how many of you have watched the violence that's happened with people trying to enforce social distancing.
Yeah.
It's actually, there was, I believe, one yesterday. It was regarding wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, where the non-mask wearer shot the mask wearer and killed him. I'm not trying to get extreme, but I do not want to put our city employees in the position of having to enforce social distancing and taking that risk. But that'll be addressed down the line if we get to yellow here in the near future. Councilwoman Ekstrom, let's try to wrap this discussion up. What's your feeling?
Okay, so my feeling is that I think until we're in yellow, it just doesn't make sense to do. You know,
Okay,
there would be so few residents serviced in the orange that I don't think it's worth it. So I would wait until yellow.
Thank you. Councilman Severing, any difference of opinion there?
Oh,
You
you
just-
muted, Blake.
You just muted yourself, Blake.
I forgot to mute before. I agree with the idea that we probably shouldn't be doing anything until we hit the yellow. I just personally can't see how easy it's going to be able to police keeping, 10, 11, 12-year-olds social distancing both on the deck and in the swimming pool. I mean, I can see the slippery slides. I can see them. I don't know. I guess I have some, I guess there's a part, I mean, I would love to see some recreational opportunities, but I'm still a little apprehensive about what could be the impact if we prematurely open it. And I don't want to see us in a situation with us already looking at a budget that's been hammered by sales tax. I just think that if we get in a situation where we're having to subsidize it more, I just don't know if that's a good thing. But on the flip side, I can also see the value of the recreational activity. But I would agree with the yellow, but please know that my initial response is I still would like to wait and see what happens with what's coming down from health officials and the governor.
Okay. All right. I think the answer, Tiffany, is we wouldn't open up for lap swimming. Councilman Swanson, is there anything else we need to address this evening?
There's one last question. We still have some training that needs to be done with the new lifeguards. If we do the training now, we are ready to go. Tiffany, I believe it's within 48 or 72 hours, we can have the pool up and running if we have them trained now. Is that correct?
Yes.
If we wait
Yeah,
to have the
we would
training,
need 1 day probably to
1 day, so 24 hours.
set things up.
If we wait to do the training till after we actually hit yellow, then it's going to take us a week, week and a half, maybe 2 weeks to be ready to roll and have the pool open. Given that if we hit yellow sometime during the summer months when the pool would normally still be open, I think it would be in our interest to have the lifeguards ready to roll so that we can take advantage of whatever time is available for that recreational activity.
Tiffany, what is the actual time? We had that discussion today to train the lifeguards. Is it a week?
Yeah, it would take us about a week to have everybody trained, and that's assuming that they can be there for, a good chunk of the day.
Yeah, Councilman Swanson, I believe if history repeats itself, the governor's been giving about a week's notice of his intent to move into the next color.
Right.
So I think we would actually, just my opinion, council's decision is that we would have adequate time to train the lifeguards with that type of notice. But other council members, thoughts?
I think you're right, Mayor. I hadn't considered that advance kind of communication that the governor's been giving. So with that, I would agree.
Anyone object to that? Okay, with that, I think we would recommend, Tiffany, that we train the lifeguards as we get notice of moving into the appropriate color outlined by the governor.
Okay, we'll watch for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany. Councilman Swanson, anything else?
No, that's everything that's on the list unless Tiffany has something else that she needs answered. Tiffany?
I don't. That answers my questions for now. Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you so
sending
much.
those out.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. We'll move now on to the third item on our agenda, which is the discussion on the fiscal year 2021 budget. That will be led by John Call, our city manager and attorney. John?
Hey, council. So let me pull up our information for this. We put together a staff report that just kind of talks, and it talks about where we're at right now as far as the budget is, some potential ideas for reductions in some costs and things. Currently, or as of the last time you saw or we talked, the budget was about $768,000 of cuts still to be made to balance. That, as you remember, the major reason why those cuts need to be made is because of a drop in revenues, particularly in sales tax, as well as a few other revenues. Since this time, Evan and the department heads and I have had some discussions and found some additional money, about $131,000 in various cuts. And some of those cuts are as small as $500 here and there. Some are larger cuts. For example, there's a significant savings by not doing cherry days in July. But it doesn't completely zero out the budget line because part of our budget is spent getting ready for cherry days. So we spend the majority of it on July 4th and then that week, but we also spend a significant amount right before that in May and June as we get ready to ramp up for it. So there is some savings there. But particularly with the list of items that were in the staff report, a lot of these additional cuts would be cuts to employee benefits or other programs. And I think that it would be, we just wanted to have some discussion about those options, answer some questions, and then I think it would be helpful to provide some pretty good guidance. I know that you all have had some time to look through these items and I imagine think about them. But this is one of those items that I don't think we want to leave hanging out there for a long time, because if we are going to make cuts in these areas, it's good to let the employees know now so that we don't end up stringing them along for a while. So, Mayor, do you want me to go through the items, or should we just start asking the council their opinions?
Once again, I would just like to say, John, I've reviewed the list of the $131,000 in budget cuts that you have identified and concurred with those. I don't know if the council would like any more information on those before we get into the list of the 6 items here, or any additional suggestions the council may have. Any interest on John giving an overview of what the 131,000 is, or do you feel comfortable Councilwoman?
I I'd like to hear them, just if nothing else, just to see their creativity and where they found this money. I think they run a pretty tight ship, but if they were able to even go and find some more,
This is pretty much,
I'd like to hear a little overview of it.
this is pretty much John. He combed through the budget. These are more of administrative things. John, just run through that list then very quickly, if you would.
Okay, so I'll pop it up here on the screen for you. Some of them are kind of citywide cuts. The first ones are, like we're a reduction in our what we pay to the Chamber of Commerce for Weber County. This would be a movement down in our sponsorship level. Then we also went through all the departments and looked and made sure that there weren't trainings that were being that wouldn't be authorized, or in some cases we found a couple duplications where one department was covering some of the computer services that were actually moved to non-departmental, and so we're just cleaning up a few items. There's just some things will be based on efforts to just be more frugal in this next year. For example, here under reduced maintenance on our buildings and grounds, that is a reduction in this building, the senior center, and the police building. We don't always use that budget entirely, but we also can be a lot more frugal. Although some of that would be a deferred maintenance, so instead of applying paint in a room that needs to be painted, we'd be putting it off for a year. And so some of those costs will come back on, but we felt like in this next year we could delay them. That's similar to some of the stuff that parks and other departments have already done this year, where they've deferred some things for a year. You had a question?
Well, John, no, I was just concurring. I think a lot of this maintenance is going to be from reduced use, right? We're not having people out and about and congregating in these places, so there's less wear and tear on them, and then they're not experiencing any kind of decrease because they're not in there. So yeah, that seems smart.
Okay. One of the bigger departments was in our streets and highways. A good example is this one, reduction in paint supplies. It's actually a lot of money that's reduced, and it's because the streets department is focusing on repaving this next year some areas of the city that don't get street paint. So the neighborhoods that don't need the white and yellow lines repainted, that actually translates into some additional savings in paints and supplies. And so it's just kind of being aware of those things. We eliminated a copier. You can see that we've even gone through and eliminated office supplies and computer purchases, and just done some things to help where we can. We've estimated that the cost savings for Cherry Days would help save some money, but we also need to eliminate some of the donations, which is shown up here, that we would get for Cherry Days, or the booth rentals and other fees. So we've kind of offset or made sure that if we're eliminating a cost that brought in some revenue, we're eliminating the revenue as well. And that net total came, the mayor said I just got my finger stuck on the one, but it's this $131,111 is what that adds up to. And you can see the original number that we were at was the $368,811. And understand those are budgeted numbers. It's not exact, but we're pretty comfortable that we can realize those savings with just, like I said, deferring a few things and being smart in the way we're spending on other projects to not cause additional expenses.
Okay, thank you, John. Is there anyone on the council that would object to eliminating the list totaling $131,000? Okay, John.
Just like prudent belt tightening to me.
Okay, let's move ahead with that. That reduces our deficit to about $637,750 approximately. Let's go back to your other list, John.
Okay, so these are I didn't number them. They're in no particular order, although at the same time I didn't randomize them. But here's some of the list of 6 items that we could do some additional cuts that are policy level decisions that need to be made by the council. The first one would be reductions in elected officials' salaries. And I'll just let you guys talk about that one. Another one would be some reduction in employee 401k matches. If you remember, we currently match 3% as well as give 3% that doesn't need to be matched. So some sort of reduction in that number. Another one would be just a change in policy on if employees can cash out sick and vacation leave. That's where they actually trade in, or they basically say, here's 40 hours of vacation or 40 hours of sick, you know, pay me my hourly rate for that. With that one, I would add that several employees use this for to pay for vacations or Christmas. We have the potential to eliminate the market wage adjustments that we've talked about over the past couple of meetings, or modify those in some way. They are currently still in the budget. And to remind you, that brings those employees who are under or significantly under their market rate of pay to an area that, or to the level that puts them in line with other jurisdictions, cities and counties. The next one would be to allow for employees to voluntarily reduce their hours and not cause issues for benefits. For example, a part-time employee could drop down to 10 hours a week instead of 20, or a full-time employee could drop down to 30 hours a week instead of 40. And both of those groups would still get the benefits they'd be entitled to as if they were working the full hours. And then there's also another option, which is a mandatory reduction in hours. And I know that the department heads that are on this call might have comments or questions if you'd like. So I'm gonna move all the department heads in as panelists, so we don't have to mute and unmute them. But that's the list, and I think it's just going to be a question of where you want to start and what you want to talk about. I think the goal was to get towards that, to get to about $250,000. And just for I didn't include the numbers in this list, just for the sake of the staff report. But if you were to eliminate all of these things or employ all of these together, there is a chance for a significant amount of savings over that $250,000. But I think you also would run into some employee morale issues as well that I'm sure you're all aware of. So go ahead, Mayor, and take us where we should go.
Well, John, I think it would be prudent for the council to know approximately what the estimated savings are in each one of these, so we can pick from the menu to get to our targeted number.
Okay.
So let's start with the potential reduction in elected officials' stipends and how you arrived at that. I believe that's about $27,000.
Right. So that's what it is, and it's based on the assumption that we would reduce elected official salaries in half. That currently doesn't include the planning commission because they're not elected, but that would do that, or that would reduce it to that 27,000. Sorry, I'm trying to pull up the sheet.
John, I believe, and no matter what the council decides, I've given my salary back with benefits. I believe the computation was as the council would give back half their stipend. But no matter what happens here, I think the $13,000 that was budgeted for the mayor's salary and benefits, we can consider that given back.
Mayor, while John is trying to pull that information up, are we looking in this exercise here to cover the entire 600,000, or in the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 scenario that you've discussed over several meetings? Are we looking to try to come up with 250, 300,000 worth?
Well, I think that's part of the discussion, Bill, and thanks for bringing that up. Because whatever we don't take out of here, we have two options left, which is the rainy day fund or property taxes. So I think that's the decision the council has to concentrate on is, frankly, I think there should be some sacrifice by all parties involved to the degree that's reasonable. I think to lay this entirely on the backs of the city employees would cause, as John said, some significant morale issues. But I think that's what the city council needs to give direction to Evan and John is, do we want to take it all out of here? Do we want to, I believe we should at least take some out of the rainy day fund. So my opinion, the answer would be no, all of it does not need to come out of here, but we need to be prudent in regards to our fiduciary duty to our citizens to, without being unfair to our employees, maximize the savings in the budget this year. Okay, John, you ready to give them the detail on each one of these?
Yeah, so I'll share this sheet. And the first one, or the first column is if you were to outright eliminate the 3%, that is the guaranteed 3% or the 3% match, it would be about a $75,000 savings to the general fund. So there would be additional savings in the utility funds as well, but these numbers are all based on general fund. If you eliminated sick leave cash out, it'd be $47,000, almost 48. And the same thing if you eliminated all cash outs, it would double that. So you could eliminate sick leave or vacation cash out for $48,000, or you could eliminate both for about $94,000 to $96,000.
Those aren't aggregated. It's one or the other. If we do both, it's 94, sick leave 47. It's not the 42,000 by eliminating both. Just want to point that out.
So one or the other is 47. If you did both, it's the 94. Currently, the market adjustments there, again, just a general fund, are about $78,000. We thought if we offered volunteer, let people voluntarily cut their hours back, we might save around $46,000. That one is fairly uncertain because it would be on a volunteer basis. If we did a mandatory cut in hours and we told basically every single general fund employee, with the exception of public safety, that they had to cut their hours back, or I should say with the exception of uniformed officers, it would save about $260,000. This one would have it does take into account some potential for unemployment benefits and costs associated with that. As the mayor mentioned, there's $27,000 for council. And then this last one, I think we had eliminated, so I apologize, it's still on this list, but it was just talking about the increase for health insurance and would the city pay all of it or none of that. And the department heads recommended that we not include that. So I apologize, it's still on the list. The department heads are here. I think you could hear from them, hear some of their thoughts. I think in general, well, I don't want to generalize for them all, but or the council could kind of lead out on your thoughts and have the department heads answer questions or whatever you think is best.
Council, would you like to hear from the department heads, or do you just want to move forward at this point in time?
Mayor?
I'd like to hear from the department heads.
Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes, I would also, please.
anyone object to that?
No, I'd like to hear from them.
All right, let's open it up to comments from the department heads. John, we'll let you see who's anxious to speak and then unmute them.
So they should be able to just unmute themselves as a panelist. I'm not sure that. Yeah. No one's volunteering to go first. So let me just tell you about one of the things that we talked about in staff meeting. And that was the idea that in 2008, we had a similar situation and a lot of benefits were taken away from employees. And there are some feelings among department heads as well as among city employees that making the budget cuts on the backs of the people who are working at the city is not a favorable option and causes injury to employee morale and things. I'm not saying it as strongly as I know that some people feel it, but I also don't want to put anyone on the spot if they don't want to be. But I want to make sure you hear that and understand that there is that concern as well.
Looks like Chief Quinney is unmuted and would like to speak. Chief?
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. And I made a couple of notes here, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but just one comment on the rainy day fund. If it's ever more rainy than it is right now, I'm not sure that we'll see that in the near future. There was a comment about a degree that is reasonable, and when we start looking at proportions, you start talking about dividing some of this money between households and then between 80 employees. We're talking about dollars compared to hundreds of dollars, and that employees should be on the hook for hundreds of dollars to provide services to the community in proportion to dollars for households. And then just to note on the market adjustment number there, the 77,000, that's remarkably less than what it was originally proposed to be. So I see that there's already been a cut there, and my ethics just come into play here. How we can, I'm not proposing that we add money to employees' pockets. I'm proposing we don't take money from employees' pocket. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Any other, Annette, looks like you'd like to make a comment?
Yes, Mayor and Council. I agree with Chief Quinney. As I look at my department and my employees, most of mine are part-time. And I know everyone's struggling right now, but I agree that it's our rainy day. Thank you.
Mayor, this is Evan. I have a comment.
Go ahead, Evan.
I would agree with what the chief said. I think market adjustments, while warranted, could probably wait. I think I would probably put cash outs next on the list, and then maybe some of the others to follow. One other idea that didn't get into the staff report, the chief brought up the option of doing some vehicle leases for police vehicles rather than purchasing new vehicles. And we've looked at how that would affect the budget. If we were to do that and then use some of the police motor pool fund balance to help cover the operations of that fund, it looks like we would be able to save about $37,000 in the general fund. And so if that's something the council is interested in, the implications of that are that we would be depleting a good portion of the police motor pool fund balance toward operations. And then we would be, I guess, giving up some of the equity that we have in vehicles in favor of taking the lease approach. So there are positives in that it frees up some cash in the fiscal year, but negatives in that we would be shifting to a lease option that locks us into annual payments every year. So that's an option for savings. And when you look at the motor pool fund, if you are interested in using fund balance for operations in the motor pool fund, it looks like we could save an additional $20,000. So there are a couple of options there to consider also.
I would just maybe caution the council that we don't make short-term decisions that are going to cost us long-term here. You'll end up paying for it one way or the other. So I would just ask the council to keep in mind the long-term effects of decisions that are being made, that it doesn't end up costing us more in the long run. Do we have any other department heads that would like to make comments before we go back to discussion with the council?
Mayor, it's Dave.
Go ahead, Dave.
So I just wanted to say that, I do agree with Chief Quinney and Evan with some of the comments that they've made. And John, I think hit it, about, when we had the issue in 07 and those kind of things, that I think that we just need to make sure that we're really looking at the morale issue of our employees. I think this council has done a very, very good job in the last few years of getting us away from that bad morale and those things. And I would just hate to see us go or take a step backwards with this whole thing. So, with whatever we have to do, there's going to have to be some give and take. And with whatever we do, I just hope that we look at, once things are better, or, if they're not as bad as we thought they were going to be, that those are some of the first things that go back onto the budget to take care of our employees.
Thank you, Dave. That's a good comment. I just want to add that in my discussions with John, I have asked him to have some triggering events of things that we would add back in if sales tax is not degraded to the degree we think. Conversely, I've asked him to have triggering events if things get worse. I'm a believer that if you look at those things now out of an emotional state versus having to make those when the emotions are high, that the decisions are more reasonable and equitable. So Dave, thanks for that reminder that we do have triggering events to include, but we also have to have things in our pocket that if things turn out worse, that we're prepared to make those decisions also. And I agree that it is raining, but I do want to make mention that sometimes it pours. And so we have set that threshold as a minimum of which we're willing to reduce the rainy day fund or the general fund excess to no less than 15%. So if we use that all this year and it does continue to rain or it starts to pour, just so the council knows, we've kind of hit our threshold. Any other comments? Tiffany, did you have a comment?
Sure, yeah, I have to say that I agree with what the other department heads have said. And with that being said, if I have to take this list and look at it, priority, I think I would place first suspending cash outs. And I think the reason for that is because if there's not a direct loss to individuals, I think it may require employees to take more vacation time instead of cashing it out, but it is time that's still paid. And I also feel like that option is easily reversed when the economy recovers to allow for that cash out option again. It's not a long lasting or long-term impact to the employees. So if I have to prioritize those, my preference would be to start with suspending cash outs for a year and see where that gets us.
Okay, thank you, Tiffany, for your comments. Councilman Swanson, as you know, I asked you to take on the assignment of being the council liaison. And working from the financial standpoint, I would like to begin the discussion with you in your feelings on these matters, knowing that the two other alternatives to turn to are the rainy day fund or property taxes. So would you lead us out in your thoughts on this, and we'll go around each council member.
I have one question that will kind of color the thoughts that I have. Evan, if we were to take 360,000 out of our rainy day fund, which is 1.8 million that we have sitting there right now, what would that reduce our percentage in the rainy day fund of our budget? Right now, we're at about 23%. Where would that take us?
Did you say 360?
Yes. If we took, so essentially, if we take 20% of what we have in the rainy day fund currently, 360,000.
And Phil, on a percentage basis, you can see that's moving because that's a percentage of the projected revenues. We've also dropped our anticipated revenues.
Right.
So there's two moving parts to that. So if we ended up with 1.5 million against what's our projected revenues again, Evan?
It's about 7.3 million. So that would bring us down to 20% of revenues.
If we took the 360 out?
Yes.
20.55% of revenues.
Okay. With that in mind, looking at what we have here, I appreciate Tiffany's comments about the short-term nature of eliminating the cash out options for this year. I would rank that up there. You all know how I feel about the extra 3% 401k. I voiced those pretty clearly when we voted on giving that extra 3%. I also understand what the department heads are saying about employee morale. We're in really tough times here, and I think we need to use our, as it stands right there with the cash out and the budget cuts, we're at 225,000. If we take that 225,000 and add to that the 360,000, we're at what, 585,000 and change. So we're more than 2/3 of the way there to, and then the portion that the residents would be expected to pay because of a raise in property taxes. And I'll remind those listening that our property taxes have dropped consistently. Our property tax rate has dropped consistently over the last 20 years. John, I don't know if you can pull up that one graph and slide that I sent over to you. I think it's sheet 1. That will give everybody on the meeting there. Sheet 1, there it is there. This is a look at what our property tax rate has done since the year 1997. You can see that in the percent change column there, it gives an idea of what the percent change year over year has been. So we increased 2%, then down 3, down 1, down 7, down 8, up 3/4, up, down 1, down 3/4, down 5, down 12, down 4.5, down 55. Now that one is not some kind of a mistake mathematically. That's when the fire district was created and those tax revenues were removed out of our rate. So our rate dropped pretty precipitously. And then it went back up because of the recession, 8%, 6%, 8%, 1%, and then gone back down 4, 6, 7, 7, 11, and almost another 7%. So that's what our tax rates have done. And I appreciate, Mayor, everything that you're doing to try to minimize the impact to our residents. But as I look at this here, we've had it pretty good for a pretty long time, and I think a moderate increase, a minimal to moderate increase in our property taxes to make up that remaining roughly $200,000 on a property tax increase would be, if I remember right, and I don't have the numbers right in front of me, that would be about a 13 or 14% increase in property taxes to bring in an additional 200,000 in revenue.
Bill, I might just throw out, just for consideration, the $3 transportation utility fee, which was declared by the courts to be a tax. We were collecting about $225,000 in that amount.
Right.
So if the council decided to increase property tax to cover this deficit, would basically be a restoration of that $3 would cover, on average, the $3 per month. And I'm saying that's an average. That would be a restoration of money the citizens were already paying. I'm just saying that from the standpoint. And John and myself have actually had some discussion on how that could be minimized. But just throwing that out for consideration.
I think that's an awesome and an appropriate consideration, Mayor. It represents a minimal impact to each household, an average of $3. It lessens the load that we put on the backs of our employees, and we make better use. Not better use, I would say, a heftier use of our rainy day funds, which is there for that purpose, for these kinds of days, and I think still leaves us sufficiently healthy for hopefully the not over the horizon monsoon downpour that could always occur, right? It still leaves us with, $1.3 million to $1.5 million in the bank for future storms.
And let me just also point out as a reminder, for the last 4 or 5 years, there's been fairly significant increases in utility rates. We are proposing to the citizens this year, no increase in utility rates. So
Right.
I'm just trying to look at the overall picture of the effect on the citizens. Because as we all know, we have many citizens out there in the community who have lost their jobs and who are on rotating furloughs.
Right.
And so I just want us to be conscientious of that as we discuss that. Conversely, we've had that same thing with our employees. I'm sure there's spouses that have lost their jobs and household income has been cut back. So to your point, Phil, we are in unprecedented, very difficult times. And as I've told some of the council members, we're facing some very difficult decisions, but we've got to be truthful and fearless in doing what's right for the city to keep it a great place to live. Sometimes those decisions aren't easy by any means. So just some color. Sorry to take up time.
No, I appreciate the color, Mayor. That I think looking at the numbers that John has on that spreadsheet there, the cash out, the budget cuts, and 360 from the rainy day fund. As you mentioned, Mayor, that $3 on average will cover the remaining deficit, and it's a minimal impact.
John, you can, and once again, I don't want to make a big issue of that, but you can add $13,000 out on that council side also.
Mayor, can I ask you a question?
Yes. Go ahead, Councilman Severie.
So just maybe for clarity for me, and thank you for the great effort, Phil. I really loved these graphs, as you know. So just for clarity for myself and for those citizens who might be watching tonight, are we talking about 13 to 14%? Or are we talking $3 to $4, or is that the same?
It would be the same. The 13, 14% on average, obviously for those with lower value homes, it would perhaps be below the $3. And for those with homes higher than, with the higher values, it might be more than the $3. So I think there's some equity that goes across universally there, but it would be, you know, a 13, 14% that on average across all homes would be about $3 per household.
So
Per
yes,
month.
so if we're saying
That's per month.
if we're
Per month.
$25 to maybe $50, depending on your house
Correct.
per year. Okay. Well, I think that's just a lot more palatable when you sometimes start throwing percentages. It's a little bit different than saying we're probably looking at maybe $4 a month. And I think that makes it a little bit more palatable for people to understand. So thank you.
That's
You bet.
probably less than half of what utility bills have been increased on a year-by-year basis. There.
Blake, on your home, it would probably be an additional $50 a month.
A year, huh?
A month.
I'm thinking, well, that's what I was using. I was using my house as an example, and I think my taxes are about 3,300. So
The North Ogden portion of that, though, is around $350, I would guess,
right.
when
Right.
you take out sewer district, fire district, and everything else.
Well, Phil, I can tell you, I think the assessed value of my home was around just under $400,000, and the taxes I paid to the city last year were $251,
Right,
down from $268 the year before.
right.
Let's-
We saw a similar drop here, and that, you know, again, I've said my piece. I think we do what I've suggested, and it's a minimal impact across the board, and it seems to be a win-win-win for the three groups that we're talking about.
Well, and I think the good thing about this is I remember John Call teaching me early on in my assignment as a city council, you know, we need to look at that maintain the rate, and we need to make sure that's completely understood as best we can among the public. We probably wouldn't be in this position today had we not had an incremental adjustment every year. So we've just got to make sure that idea of maintaining the rate is clear, that it's very minimal, and yet it's something that the city faces like every family faces.
We would probably be the exception, Councilman Severing, to cities not maintaining the rate. I believe would be the exception. Everyone else, I think, is maintaining that rate. But I still believe at some point in time, the strategic discussion that has to take place is how are essential services, primarily public safety, financed in this city? Because we all know that the economy has its ups and downs. And for a number of years, the city has banked on the economy continuing to climb to fund basic operations. And I think that strategy may have to be looked at. And I class myself as a fiscal conservative, and I'm not one that wants to raise taxes. But I think at some point in time, you have to deal in reality, and you can't have 50% or less of your public safety funded through property taxes. Just, it's very difficult.
Mayor, I totally agree with you. I totally agree.
Let's move on to Councilwoman Stoker, if we could, to get her input on these items. That could you take that back, John, to the worksheet?
Mayor, somebody asked me the question today. They wondered how much does the city actually get percentage of the property taxes from Weber County? How much do we get out of all of the taxes that go in that we pay?
I can tell you from my standpoint, we get under 8% of the total tax bill.
Mm-hmm.
My taxes were, I think, around $3,200. Like I say, I believe I paid $251 to the city. So I would say a little bit less than 8% of what everyone sees on their annual tax bill from the county, which includes many entities, Pineview Water, Northview Fire, all those things, the city's getting less than 8%.
Thank you. My thoughts on this, and I agree with what the department heads have said. I'm not in favor of cutting, their hours or their time and stuff like that, because we did that, years ago, and it did cause in 2008, it did cause a huge morale problem. And so I think they need to stay where they're at. I don't know if we took away their 3% that we gave them with the stipulation that when things improve, they would get it back. I mean, I think that's always been on the table. So, and I do think, as much as we all hate it to even talk about it or say, at one time, somebody's got to decide on something with property taxes to keep up, to maintain.
Councilman Barker, refresh my memory. You said something to me that last year there was a discussion about increasing property taxes last year, but there was a reason that didn't happen.
Well, yeah, last year we had a deficit. I think it was about 600,000 if I remember. And we discussed increasing property taxes or finding other ways. And the staff came up with other ways to come up with that money. And at the time, Councilman Turner said, either we need to do it now or look at it next year. Well, last year was a great economic year. This year's not so great. So when is a good time to do it? There's never a great time.
Do you have any other comments, Councilwoman Stoker?
No. Go ahead. No, I don't. Go ahead.
Okay.
Phil.
Philip,
Unmute, Phil.
you're muted, Phil.
Well, you're supposed to read my lips.
Okay.
To tag along or to coattail on what you said earlier, Mayor, about moving public safety away from something that's more economically driven, I think that we would be wise to any tax increase that we do this year, that we go to that special service district and the increase is done in that line item. We maintain our current property tax rate in the standard, I'll use that in air quotes, property tax. And then we have that public safety line item that assures our residents that the additional monies that we are collecting is being used for an essential need.
John, don't we have deficits? If we did that, as explained by Councilman Swanson, and the additional monies were only used for public safety, isn't this an overall deficit this year? Or would that satisfy what we're short? Because I don't believe, of course, we've left the $77,861 market adjustment in there. I believe, 20-something of thousand of that is all that goes to the police department. But would that restrict us this particular year because of the shortfall in revenue, or could we do that?
So we could, in this particularly, we would say this number here is going to be our special revenue fund. And so instead of adding this to the property tax, you would create the special revenue fund, and then this $200,000 number, we would have to show how we are spending that only on public safety. And so it would be going back into the same pile, because currently public safety is pulled out of general fund, which all of these are reductions in the general fund. Does that answer your question? Is that what you were asking, Mayor?
It just doesn't seem like we can say we're gonna take that money and spend it on public safety when we know we've got deficits this year. And I could see that if we decided to move forward with a public safety building. But I'm saying from an operational standpoint, does that help us really at all? Councilman Barker?
Couldn't we just have, if we did that, made a special revenue fund, have the police department redo their budget of what they're pulling from the general fund? And then they'd get that close to $200,000, and then we'll fill in the rest.
In that case, it's what I would say is a shell game when it comes to operational.
Well, it's, yeah, similar, but it's the same as if we just left it in the general fund and then we divvied it out. Either way, they're still getting the same amount of money.
Yeah, I think just in full transparency, we wouldn't say that in the same vein we talked about having a special district fund to potentially fund a public safety building. I think this is different. This is more operational, but
Okay, I'm okay either way, but
Councilwoman Ekstrom, do you have a comment?
Oh, I've got lots of things going on in my brain. So going back to this special revenue.
You got 5 minutes like the public comment.
No. Hey, you gave me the floor. I get to go.
Give you 5
So
minutes.
anyway, I'll arm wrestle you for it. But anyway, the special revenue fund. So is the line of thinking that that is just for the public safety building, or are we going to roll the whole public safety department, i.e., all of the police, all of that operation? Is that going to just be like, okay, everything having to do with the police, public safety building, all of the officers, blah 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 blah? Is that all going to go into that special revenue fund, or is that just the public safety building? Is that kind of one of the things that we're trying to decide?
That wouldn't be segregated for a public safety building. That would be used for current operations. Basically throughout the general fund. We do have to remember public safety is a component of the general fund. So this would not be set aside for that purpose you said.
Okay, so operations stay in general fund, and then we have the special revenue fund just for the public safety building, kind of a capital fund kind of thing. Okay, that makes sense to me. All right.
So the special revenue fund is whatever you set the parameters up as, but when you set those parameters up, they can't be changed. So if you said the special revenue fund will only cover physical improvements to the police building, then that's all you could spend it on. If you said it could cover all police expenses, you can use it that way. But I think what the mayor's saying is correct, is making that more narrow and more dedicated can be an easier way to make it clear that it will be used. In theory, you could say this will only be spent on police salaries, and then that's all you could use that money for.
Okay. All right, that makes sense. I like pigeonholing the budget to say this is what it's for. That makes sense to me. Okay. Going back to this with the employees, I am loath to take anything away from our employees. I mean, I'm going to get a little bit teary here. They give us so much from what I have seen. They give us that priceless part. They give us their hearts. They give us their minds. They work so hard. And, we can trim and trim and trim, but, at some point, kind of like cutting your fingernails, you can only trim so much. And then that's really painful and it's ineffective. So, does cashing out the sick leave, I just, that weighing how much we cut versus how much it affects them in their, they're already, families are already struggling. We were already just trying to get them back up to even, what the market rate was. So I really would rather not touch that. you know, I would really like to see our employees, you know, that we keep our promises to our people. So, you know, if we have to, you know, you can take my stipend, that's fine. That's not gonna really affect me that much, but, you know, I think we have employees that really need this, and to, you know, to feed their families and take care of them. And I would like to leave that alone. I would rather dip a little bit more maybe into the rainy day fund and revisit this if it does get to a monsoon, and then we're all having to, you know, tighten anything we can. But I don't think we're to monsoon yet. And I would like to leave that alone.
So are you
Just
saying
my
you'd like
input.
to leave the cash out alone? Is that what you're saying, Charlotte?
No, I would like to leave all of that in myself. Except, well, council, I can say you can put my council stipend back in. That could be cut if we decide to do that. But anything else, I don't really want to touch it. I really don't. I would like to, you know, just for the sake of morale, I guess, and just to say that we value you. I would like to leave it in. So that was me.
And I would just like to make mention that that cash out is fairly unique to public servants. I'm not sure I'm aware of many private entities that allow sick leave to be cashed out. I believe they can cash out up to 500 hours. And once again, I agree that we don't want to impair our employees' morale, and we want to be fair with them. But I think at some point too, now that we've raised the salaries up to the market and we look at the benefits, at some point in time, and this might not be real popular, but as we talked about in the campaign process, at some point in time, the city needs to be run like a business.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that happens overnight, but we have to start moving in that direction at some point in time without grabbing and taking away from our employees. But I do believe we need to keep that in mind as we start developing strategies for long-term in the city. Because I agree, we've got great city employees, and I don't think anybody's that I'm aware of has ever proposed that they take this whole load on their backs. So any other comments, Charlotte? Because your 5 minutes is getting pretty close.
You give me the microphone, I can go all day. No, it's
How
and
easy
again,
it is to mute. It's really easy to mute.
and I can unmute. We'll go on a little war here. No, I guess what I'm looking at is the city employees that I have seen have looked to cut everywhere else they can. And they have found ways to come under budget that I think are pretty incredible, you know, and they've worked harder for that. And so I hate to, you know, I would rather reward that kind of, you know, they're looking to see, I'd rather employ the employees more and have them be looking for other ways to cut than pull it away from them and then they stop looking, right? So that's just kind of my perspective there. I think you know, they are
I'm still looking for clarity. What's your take on this 94,202 that's sitting out there in column C?
I would look to the department heads. Are you guys okay taking that? Is nobody gonna lose any sleep over that? Nobody's gonna have any heartburn? And again, we're dealing with all sorts of different employees, but is the general feeling that if we took that, because that is $94,000, that's quite a lot, that we still maintain happy employees if we eliminate that? So if the answer to that is, yeah, I think we can, and the departments head say, yeah, that's okay, you can go ahead and take that, we're ready to tighten our belts too, then yeah, let's do that. But I'd like to keep as much as we possibly can in there.
Okay, thank you, Councilwoman Ekstrom. Councilman Barker?
Yes, I feel the same way. I voiced this to you, I'm against taking away any benefits from our employees, mainly because like the department have said, back in 2008, they took away a benefit and said, we'll put it back when the market's great. And it took 12 years to get the market great enough to put a benefit back. So if we take away any benefits and we come back and say, well, we'll put it back when it's great. What if we're not on the council and the next councils won't do it then? So I don't want to take anything away. I'm okay taking away the cash out benefit as long as have you stated that there's triggers where if the market's better than we're projecting, we put it right back in so that they do have that for Christmas or vacations if they need it. But other than that, I like what Phil said about, or Councilman Swanson, about raising some property taxes. That goes along with what Chief Quinney said. It's a lot better to have the whole city cover our city expenses than to have our employees cover our city expenses. So I would rather we go around what Councilman Swanson's proposed. And I agree with Councilwoman Ekstrom. I'm okay with the council if we reduced our stipends. That one I'm perfectly fine with because that affects me and it doesn't affect our employees.
And also, as far as the third tier goes, yeah, I think a property tax increase, a modest one that just covers what people were already paying. Yeah, because that's kind of a three-tiered approach, right? We've got an increase that, that this residents are going to contribute to it. We're going to find cuts and we're going to dip into the rainy day fund and kind of finding that balance. I think that's a good one.
Councilman Severing, do you have any comments you'd like to throw in?
Well, yeah, I was thinking that when we were talking about adjusting the rainy day fund from 250 to 360, we were trying to minimize then what would be taken out or from the employees. Did I misunderstand that?
I think you were right. It was in effect to try to reduce any effect on the team and also minimize the property tax increase that was being discussed.
I'm like Charlotte and Ryan. I'm okay. I actually have already texted John earlier. I don't need the stipend. So I can see that John is, now that's been verbalized, I'm okay to give up the stipend as well. So where does that put us at? I'd like to know a total right now to know where we're at.
It's right here on this sheet. We're $156,500 short, basically.
That's assuming 360 out of the rainy day fund, et cetera, et cetera.
These three things, the 131, the 27, and the 94. So you add that to the 360, it gives us 612, and we're 768 short. So we're 156, a deficit.
Okay, so
here's talking about, I'm sorry, Blake, since we're talking about the effect, I'm going to throw this out and, John or somebody, I've been having conversations with John and we're all concerned about the team. And I think we ought to be just as concerned about our citizens because there are many people out there in these economic times that are struggling. So I'm going to propose if we're going to increase that property tax, John, I'm going to ask that we invoke the discussion you and I had about returning that same amount to our citizens during these tough economic times from the illegal transportation utility fees that were collected, that were classified as a tax. And I would say we give that credit on our citizens' utility bills each month to offset the potential property tax increase we're talking about. Because as we started this discussion and trying to balance everything out and sacrifice kind of somewhat equally, I believe that still applies. And and I agree with those feelings, but I have those same feelings towards our citizens. And we may have to return that money eventually, we may not. I believe that's going to go through the appeals court, it's going to go to the Supreme Court. There's always the chance that we wouldn't have to return that money, but I'm going to propose that to the council, that we also return that money to our citizens during these tough economic times. Councilman Swanson.
Mayor, I don't know if there's a mechanism that we can do this, but rather than going through the gymnastics of trying to give a credit on utility bills and those kinds of things, John, can you remind me what the amount is we have in that transportation utility fee? Isn't it 1.5 or something like that?
1.2, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just over 1.1 million, like 1.184 or something like that.
So Mayor, what if instead, in lieu of a property tax hike, we take 160,000 out of that? It's a fund that can be transferred out of into the general fund. We take 160,000 out of that, and then we're balanced and we don't need a property tax increase.
John, correct me if wrong, but I think that's a utility fee that belongs in utility funds, and you can't take money from the utility fund and transfer into the general fund, can you?
So any sort of a transfer would be hard to do because, so what I'm saying is assuming that what the Pleasant Grove court said is 100% correct. So that's what I'm basing my comments on. In theory, that money should be returned. It should be returned to them as opposed to just reallocated. Because if it wasn't collected appropriately, then it should be given back. And so the question is how to give it back. And I don't think you could just transfer it fund to fund and say, well, we're not going to charge them this money. But I do think I'd probably reach out to the league's attorney and just talk through a couple of these things with them to just make sure that we're going to be 100% on board and not give the money back or spend it in a way that we then have to give it back again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think this would be a proposal to give back money to the citizens that's been at this point in time declared illegal. However, there's always the chance the court could come back and say you can't collect that on a go forward basis. We made the decision to stop collecting it, even though the decision was being appealed. So I think, Phil, the situation is money that belongs to the citizens. We may or may not have to give it back. But I think in these economic times, our citizens are struggling. And I would suggest that we do that. I still believe the strategy and funding public safety has to be addressed. And I think we know where that's going to come from ultimately down the road. So just 2 bits. And John, I think that would be correct. I don't know where we, if we're returning the money to the citizens, how we'd have to return it twice, but it would surely be wise to double check that. Councilman Swanson?
Mayor, if we're looking at this as a return of that money to offset a potential property tax increase, if we'd have to, would we be looking at just doing a flat $3 to each household? Or would it be a scaled thing where, depending on the value of your home, you're getting more than somebody has a lower? If we can return it, and John, I think we'd have to look at this from a legal perspective. But if we can return it at $3 a month to each household, with roughly 6,200 households, that's 223,000 and change that we would be giving back, $3 a month to each household to offset any property tax increase. Is that what you're thinking, Mayor?
Yeah, you have to give it back in the same method you collected it.
Right.
So we collected $3 per month per household, so it would have to be returned to those who gave it. So it couldn't be prorated based upon the value of your home.
Right.
And frankly, we can, if we don't get in a situation where it'd be double giving back, we give back whatever we want to the citizens right now. The only risk is we know our roads are in terrible shape. And if the court says you don't have to give it back, as John said, the money stays there until instructed. I'm just saying, in these economic times, because of the unusual situation our citizens are facing, would that be something that should be considered? Not on an ongoing basis. If the court says where you need to give it back, we'll give it back as instructed. But I'm just saying our citizens are in very unusual and unprecedented times also. And we have a
Mayor,
lot of people, some people may say, well, $50 isn't that much a year. But we've got a lot of citizens that are on fixed income, or as I said previously, have lost their jobs.
Mayor, I would think that the only challenge to that is we can't really make that decision until we have a higher court decision, right?
No, we can return the money anytime we want. Now, we may ultimately not have to, but John, correct me, we don't have to wait for the court to tell us to give that back. Just like we could have still been collecting it because they didn't tell us we had to stop.
That's correct. The only one who's bound by the court order is Pleasant Grove City.
There's a part of me that would think, because we do have needs for our roads, that I think the citizens would probably feel better. I'm just guessing, but as a citizen myself, I would rather have the city have that money to use on roads than to give me a check for $50. If we have it, we ought to use it for the roads.
But we can't make that decision for the citizens. If the court says, hey, look, this was collected illegally and you have to give it back. You know, if some citizens want to say keep it, fine, but we can't make that decision for them.
I just worry about the idea of, I mean, I can see where it's kind of a balance of, hey, we're going to give this back to you in lieu of a property tax, but then we find ourselves back in the same situations where we next year haven't done anything to maintain any kind of, we haven't made a commitment this year to kind of, I hate to use the word beef up the budget because you don't get much of a beef with $50, but I mean, it gets us moving in the right direction.
Yeah, we would still implement the property tax increase if the council votes that. But remember,
I kind of got the impression it was I guess my impression was that we were going to try to offset it by giving him back the transportation fee.
no, what we'd say is the property tax increase that's being talked about the council, if that takes effect, I'm only saying from a cash flow standpoint, because remember, we can't determine what to do with that money. We can give it back anytime we want, even if the court didn't rule that way.
Right.
But if the court rules that way, it's not like we have a wide spectrum of what we can do with that money. It has to be returned.
So I guess then maybe for me, for clarity, if we were to just decide tonight, we're going to give it all back and everybody gets a check, then we're still going to raise, if we feel like it's a necessity, we're still going to raise property taxes this year.
That's what whatever the council decides. I'm just saying, if the council decides to raise property taxes, I'm just saying, is that an option to minimize the effect to our citizens during very difficult times? I'm just throwing that out as an option for consideration. The council can, say, no, we don't want to do that. But I'm just, saying that we've got some tough decisions to make, short-term and long-term. We're in a very unusual situation right now. Very tough time to raise property taxes, even though probably that's what needs to take place. I'm just saying, how do we offset that to our citizens that are also struggling, who have lost their jobs, who have no income? And we talk about, and I agree, you want to talk about the morale of the city employees, talk about the morale of our citizens. I think we have to balance this, is all I'm saying.
So Mayor, if I may ask, so we have this, what was it, 1.5 million?
It's under 1.2, I think, just under 1.2.
1.2, that it's really just sitting there, right? We're not going to touch that until we find out about anything, right? So I wouldn't be opposed to giving it back into credit on people's utility bills. I mean, if we're really not going to touch it anyway, it's like it might as well be in our citizens' pocket, and then we're gonna, we up their property taxes. So net it's kind of a wash. But if that money's just sitting there, it might as well be in our residents' pockets. It's just sitting in an account waiting for somebody to tell us what to do with it. Am I missing something?
Well, once again, if the court says you don't have to give that back, we're not looking retrospectively, we're looking prospectively. That money would be used on roads. But according to John and his magical 8-ball, he's pretty confident that at some point in time, we may be required to return that, but we may not either. That's the decisions of the court. So Councilman Barker, did you have a comment?
I like your proposal of giving the citizens back a $3 credit on their utility bill to offset this increase we're talking about.
Okay, Philip, Councilman Swanson, you're the main member on the council that's been given this assignment. Tell us your thoughts.
I like the idea of the monthly credit, the $3 monthly credit, returning a portion of those funds, recognizing the rather interesting times that we're in. And I think it's an excellent idea, Mayor.
Okay, let's return to this. Are we okay then with what's been put out here on this worksheet thus far with looking to make up the 156,000 based on the next item on our agenda? Is anyone opposed to that worksheet at this point in time?
Can I say one thing?
Yes, Councilman Barker.
The only, like I said, I have no issue giving up the council stipend. The only concern I have is when it gets put back on, it may become public that we're giving ourselves a raise, and people do not like to see councils giving themselves a raise.
And by the way, just so you know, that's half the stipend for the council members. That's not full.
Well, yeah, so then we'll be giving ourselves at that time a 100% raise.
Councilman Swanson.
Mayor, is that 27,000 correct? I looked at the math, and our stipend is 500 a month times 5, so that's $2,500 a month times 12.
That's
And
30,000 plus the mayor's. So what that would
plus the
be,
mayor's. Okay,
this would be half of the council stipend and 100% of the mayor's.
Gotcha. Okay, I wasn't including yours.
But that's voluntary. Don't feel pressure to do that.
Oh, no, I don't have any problem doing that.
Because I understand some, that may be part of their monthly grocery bill, and I don't want anybody to feel any pressure.
Mayor, does your sacrifice of your entire stipend, does that take into consideration the half of your stipend that you donated to another nonprofit?
Well, this will be all of next year's.
That's all of next year's. Okay, great. No,
this year that was given to the Gold Star
right.
was just from January to June. This would be from July 1st till the following July 1st.
Great.
Let me make this proposal. I will talk with each council member and get their individual desire, and that won't be disclosed if some people want to keep it, some people want to give it up. So I will have that discussion with each individual council member, and they can make an individual decision. Is that fair?
Mayor, you don't need to call me. I'm happy with giving up half. I don't have a problem.
I'm going to call everybody just so nobody is singled out, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because I don't want anybody to feel that they're in an awkward position and have to do that just to feel the peer pressure. So thank you. All right. Any other questions on that? Does that give adequate direction, Mr. Call?
Mayor, I have a comment.
Kevin, go ahead.
I'm just wondering what the chances are that a judge would require us to pay interest on the money that we charge residents. And I worry a little bit if we start paying back the money $3 at a time, that the interest calculation could turn into a monster. So I don't know if John has any feel for that, or if anybody knows if that might be a factor in the equation.
Well, so I think I have what I need for a decision on how the budget's gonna look, and I think we need to do some more research on how that would return, what would be the right way to return the money for taking into those type of considerations that Evan's talking about, as well as all the other legal stuff too. So, I'm guessing I'm saying I'm not expecting the council to give a firm recommendation on that right now. It's more of a recommendation on these proposed budget amendments.
Well, John, I would say if you find out that there's no legal problems with doing that the council's authorized it to be done. I don't think we need to kick that can down the road anymore. If you find out there's no legal problems with giving that money back to the citizens, I would say, unless the council says different, that's authorized to do so. The only thing that would stop it is something that would prohibit it from being legal.
Okay.
Is that correct, council?
Yes.
Everybody, is that a shake of your head, Councilwoman Stoker? Okay, good. Does that give you clear direction, John?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to item 4 then. Our discussion on property tax. Our presenter will be Evan Nelson, our finance director. After he makes his presentation, we'll have public comments. So Evan?
Thanks, Mayor. So we've already covered quite a bit on property taxes tonight. We provided some basic information on how property taxes work. I don't know, do you want me to go through all the detail of that?
Not unless we get into public comments and the public would like to know that information. I think,
Okay.
If they do, we can go there, but it may not be necessary unless requested by public comment, unless the council wants to know how it works.
Okay. So
Council, do you want him to go through that, or do you know how the property taxes work? What's your take?
I'm good.
I'm good.
That's great. I'm clear.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Evan?
that answers my question. So the real question for the budget then is the dollar amount that you would like generated by additional property taxes. And I think in John's spreadsheet, it showed 130 or 50 something thousand. Is that right?
156,000, I believe, was the shortfall, assuming that all those other things come to pass. My opinion is we ought to have a little cushion because we're making our best guesses on a lot of these things, but I do want to reiterate something I forgot. I think this is very important that was brought up by the department heads and others. If our estimate of shortfall in sales tax revenue and other revenues, if we're finding out that we're collecting more than that, we need to restore the things we've taken away. If it gets worse than that, we need to be prepared to address some of those other things that were on the list. So in my opinion, just my sole opinion, we ought to have a little leeway, and it probably ought to be equal to the amount that we're talking about offsetting, that average of, $36 a year on the average per household. But that's the council's decision.
Okay, so to respond to that, our annual budgeted revenue for the transportation utility fund, which is generated by the $36 per household per year, the annual budgeted revenue is $223,000. So if you want that revenue stream fully replaced by property tax, we would plug $223,000 more and the new rate would be calculated based on that additional requested revenue.
That's a council decision. And it obviously would require, just everyone already knows this, that being the case, it would require a truth and taxation hearing.
That's correct. I did a calculation. This is just an estimate and it would vary based on property value, individual property value. But my estimate of the average impact is that for every $100,000 of increased revenue, a resident would pay an additional $15.81 per year.
State that again, Evan, I'm sorry.
So if the council said we would like to increase property tax revenue by $100,000, I'm estimating the average impact to be $15.81 per year per resident.
No, Evan, I think it's the average of $3. It's the offset of the $3 that was really a tax before that was being collected as a fee. It's the average of $36 a resident average.
Right. I was just giving you the dollar amount per 100,000.
Right,
And
I think the difference was that the revenue collected was closer to 223,000, right? So he's just giving it to you in $100,000 increments.
Well, and here's a problem that obviously John's gonna have to find out, is that money needs to be returned to the people that paid it, as we talked about before. It can't be transferred. I don't know, John, how we end up people who have moved out of the city, for instance. I mean, it can be somewhat complicated, but I also don't believe that people just moving into the city who didn't pay it, they shouldn't get it either. So just keep that in mind as you try to figure that one out.
I believe we could look back at our utility bill records and know who paid and who didn't pay and how much they paid.
Yeah, so we wouldn't be collecting 223,000 because there's some people that we wouldn't be collecting it from. So, but I think it ought to be calculated on that average.
Okay, so I just did that math. If you want to collect 223,000 to replace the transportation utility revenue, it would be approximately $35.26 per household on average.
Okay.
Per year, correct?
Per year.
So about $298 a month.
That almost restores the amount I paid less last year from the year before.
Right.
Almost gets me back to even. So council, Evan, what else on that before we ask the council if that's their desire to increase property taxes?
So yeah, we just need to know what dollar amount you want for your target being generated from additional property tax, and we can incorporate that into the budget.
I'd say the $35, the average. It'll be less for some and more for others.
So
But once again, that's what the council's gonna have to vote on here or suggest. This is just a work session, so.
Right. Our plan is to put this, whatever you tell us, put it into the tentative budget so that next week you can vote on the tentative budget. So let us know what you'd like to do there.
Let's get you an answer right now. Let's start with Councilwoman Stoker.
It's like one of those deals that's like no, but yes. I think we have to, so I'm okay with what's been proposed.
Councilman Severing.
I would say yes.
Councilman Barker, what's your take?
Yes, I like, yep, 223,000 is a good number.
Councilwoman Ekstrom, you want to give us your opinion?
Yeah, so what does that do to our overall budget look like? Is that 223,000, does that get us close enough to our balanced in the budget with all of the other tax cuts that we're thinking of? And the rainy day fund and this, so are we kind of deciding between rainy day fund versus how much we take in additional tax revenue? Do you understand my question? So how close are we?
It would give us a cushion of about $65,000 based upon the assumptions used in the budget, which is
Okay.
pretty
Yeah.
minimal on a nearly $8 million general fund revenue budget.
Absolutely. Alrighty, yeah, 225 things seems great.
There's a lot of uncertainties.
Right.
Councilman Swanson, this is your baby. What do you, give us your thoughts? Hold it, you're talking too fast. I can't read your lips.
Mute.
There we go. Can you read them now?
Yeah, I can read them now.
Okay, sorry about that. I agree with what the rest of the council has said. Raising taxes is never a pleasant thing, but it's something that hasn't happened legislatively in 20 years, more than 20 years here in North Ogden, really since 1997. What's been proposed is a very minimal, and it's by and large offset by the return of those funds that were so far deemed illegally collected. So the 223 is fine with me in property tax. I think that would, I'm trying to remember, I think that would be about 13% maybe.
Of the North Ogden city tax, right? Not the total bill.
Not the total bill, the
Let me
North
just
Ogden
ask-
city tax.
Let me just ask the council a question. Is that conditional upon the ability to give the money back or what? Or is that just Councilman Barker?
I'm gonna say no, because we've already reduced their utility fees by $3 by taking away that transportation utility fee. So if we're giving them back their $3, we're actually putting them ahead.
With no increase in proposed increases in utility bills this year.
Right.
Just really unprecedented time. So I think if I understand right, let's add that into the budget and talk about approval of the budget next week. So build that in, Evan.
Okay, one follow-up question. Our current approach is that all property tax revenue just goes into the general fund. And we've had discussion about the possibility of a special revenue fund. Just wanted some clear direction on whether we continue as we have been doing, or if you're interested in setting up a special revenue fund.
That would be up to the council. I'll voice my opinion. I think setting up that revenue fund would be a little bit premature right now because this is basically to help balance an operational budget, not a special fund to use for construction or whatever may happen down the road. But that's, once again, council decision. Councilman Swanson, we've had discussions on this. You've thought a lot about it. Do you think the time is now or?
No, I think with what we've been able to accomplish tonight, I don't think now is the time that we need to set up that special revenue fund. I think we tie that to the public safety building and whatever we end up doing there or end up not doing, that would be the appropriate time to secure that.
Okay, anybody object to Councilman Swanson's recommendation? If so, please state. If not, we'll move on to public comments. Unless the council has any other comments before we go to. So those with us in the public, if you'd be preparing to render your comments, if you have any. In the meantime, we'll hear from Councilman Barker.
I'd just like to reiterate, we are not putting any money aside for the public safety building. And it's not in part of our discussion at all. And nothing we are doing is towards that at this time.
I think that's a good clarification based upon some of the things that have been circulating in the city, Councilman Barker.
Mayor,
Yes, Councilman.
I just want to say one thing too. I think it's important. None of us wants to raise taxes, but none of us want to go without proper services either.
Well, once again, like I say, if people looked at their property tax bill, they'd be seeing that most people paid less to North Ogden last year than this year. And frankly, I am not sure that I know of any business or any city, and I'm not that knowledgeable worldwide, but I'm not sure I'm aware of any businesses that haven't had to increase their source of revenue, or a city that hasn't increased property taxes for the period of time that Phil talked about. And I think none of us are, we all are citizens of North Ogden, and we'll be paying our fair share of that. And nobody likes taxes. I understand that. So thank you, Councilman Severing. Any other comments before we seek comment from the public?
If I could go
Councilwoman Ashby,
ahead.
do you have a comment?
Yeah, and again, just a reiteration of what Councilman Barker said is that the discussion around the public safety and its corresponding fund is not what we're deciding on right now. So I want to be, really clear. We haven't made any decisions about the public safety building, about its budget, about its, scope, anything like that. We've had one proposal and that's it. And so, there's a lot of more work to be done on that before we start looking at funding it. We don't know what that is yet. And so
Yes,
hopefully.
That's correct.
Mhm.
Some people have said we've already decided on a bond. We've already approved. That is not true. That discussion will be vetted in the public, totally transparent. At this point in time, we've got our hands full with dealing with the pandemic and our current budget, and that's where our concentration is. So thank you for that clarification. Anyone else before we ask for public comment? Seeing no comments, John, would you monitor to see what we have from the public in regards to comments?
Sure. The first person with their hand up was Keith Folger. So he can unmute himself and speak.
Keith, if you would state your full name and address, we'd appreciate it.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can, Keith.
Okay, Keith Folger, 497 East, 3525 North. And I want to just make some general comments about property tax. But before I do that, I need a clarification. Is the line item on the Weber County property tax labeled North Ogden City? Is that the property tax that you're talking about that comes to North Ogden City?
I believe that's correct, Keith. It's on the bill that comes from the county. It says North Ogden City. That's correct.
Okay. Well, and let me say generally, I appreciate all of your sensitivity to this impact of all of this on the citizens. Mayor, especially, I agree with most of everything you said with regard to that concern. And so I provided some of this information to you and the council in an email that I sent on April the 9th. And here's the situation that with the numbers that I looked at. I looked at my property tax situation from 2009 to 2018, so a 10-year period. And my overall Weber County tax bill in that 10-year period went up 35%.
Mm-hmm.
While my adjusted gross income increased only 20%. And so, I'm retired and basically on a fixed income with the exception of the small Social Security account or raise that we get a year. And then I have a military retirement that's raised by that same amount whenever that amount is given. So that's a huge 35% in 10 years is a huge increase when my income is only increasing 20%. And another important figure, I think, is I looked at the US Census Bureau data for Weber County for median household income. And for that same 10-year period, median household income increased 22% for that same 10-year period, 2009 to 2018. And so all of that says that when you look at Weber County property taxes, we're really putting our citizens in a tough spot, especially those on fixed income, as the mayor said, and with no income. I've expressed my concern to the Weber County commissioners with regard to this same feeling. Now, I don't know what happened to my North Ogden property taxes then, but when I looked at my 2009 Weber County tax sheet, I paid $182.42 that year. When I look at 2018, and 2019 was the same thing, I paid $214. So my North Ogden taxes have actually gone up $31.84. That didn't quite match the graph that I was shown, or that you showed. So that's a 17 for me. That was a 17, a little over 17% increase in my North Ogden taxes in that 10-year period.
So about 1.7% average per year.
About what?
About 1.7% on average per year.
Yes, yeah. Which North Ogden City has obviously done an unbelievably fine job in holding the line on property taxes, even though mine, for some reason, shows that, like you said, Mayor, 1.7% increase a year over that 10-year period.
Hey, Keith, have you, just curious, have you looked at what your healthcare premiums and healthcare costs increased during that same time?
What they increased?
I'm just saying, I looked at the amount I'm paying for premium for insurance during a 10-year period.
Yes.
And I agree with you. The city has done a good job of being fiscally responsible, and we will continue to do that. But I think we also know that costs have been rising probably more than 1.7% a year, and we've been funding public safety with economic related things. And that's the problem we face, Keith, is all of a sudden the economy come to a screeching halt, and we're anticipating our revenue from sales tax will be down 20%. That's kind of what's got us in this situation. What other comments do you have, Keith?
Well, that's all. I think there's, in quick summary, to me, that when I know what some of the thinking is with the public safety building, this property tax increase could turn out to be a huge impact on citizens, huge impact. And so I just think that you need to do all you can to minimize that impact. And just from the discussion I've heard tonight, I think you're doing that. And I think that's important that you communicate to the citizens what you're doing to minimize the impact and how you're scrubbing the public safety building. Mayor, you made the comment tonight that the city council hasn't looked inside the building, and they yet need to do that to see that they agree with wants versus needs. And so I just think that all of this has got to be really communicated carefully and in detail to the citizens, particularly as you move forward on the public safety building.
Great points, Keith, and you can be assured that everything we will do will be transparent, and the citizens will have ample opportunity for input. And we understand the fiduciary duty you've asked us to fulfill by electing us to public office. So you can be assured we will look at everything. We will have open discussion, and we will make the decisions that are tough. We've got to be truthful, but we've got to be fearless in making sure that we keep North Ogden a great place to live, and particularly when it comes to public safety. So know that, we understand that there's challenges in leadership, and we will be thoughtful and we'll be strong in our decisions, but we'll also be cognizant of our citizens.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Keith. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Swanson, did you want to make a comment now, or did you want to wait till we got through?
I just wanted to make a quick clarification on that graph that was shown earlier. Keith, you're correct in that your dollars have gone up. That graph was a representation of the tax rate. Ostensibly, what we've done every year is to reduce the tax rate to offset some of the increase in taxes that you would have seen if we had left the tax rate steady and the valuation of your home went up.
Oh, thank you for that explanation. That clarifies it significantly. So, okay.
If we had kept the 1997 tax rate, this year's property tax revenue would be almost double what it is.
See, and that's great, Phil. And that's some of the kind of stuff that you've got to get out to the public when you start talking about the raising property tax for the public safety building. Because the mayor said the fact that you've done that is huge. That's huge for us as citizens. So those are the kinds of things that will make selling the public safety building more palatable.
Thanks, Keith.
Thanks, Keith. John, do we have other comments from the public? Thank you very much, Keith. Appreciate those comments.
Yes, we do. Julie Anderson is next.
Okay, Julie Anderson, state your full name and address for us again, please.
Julie Anderson, 940 East, 2600 North. I don't really have much to say. I understand this is hard. I'm so glad I'm sat on this side of the camera and not that side, having to try and deal with raising property taxes. But can I ask a question of Evan? He mentioned a $35, $34,561. I don't remember the exact amount. Is that for the whole price, for your whole property, or is that on the 100% in an increase? If that question makes sense at all.
The $35.26 is just an average. It's based on the average property in North Ogden City.
Okay.
And so that would be an annual increase to your property tax bill.
Okay, because I wanted that clarified, just so that, because at first I was like, if he's doing that on the $100,000 per $100,000, that's a huge increase. And so I just wanted to make sure that that was clarified and stuff like that. So thank you for what you're doing. I know this is hard, and it's not easy. But I think people are getting more clarification and more knowledge about why you're raising the property taxes. So thank you for your time. That's it tonight, until public comments.
Thank you, Julie.
Next, Mayor, we have Jay Dalpaz.
Okay, Jay, good to have you with us tonight. If you'd like to unmute, we'd love to hear your comments.
Thanks. JD Dalpas, 734 East, 2700 North. Just wanted to mention a couple of things. So I sent an email to the city council and the mayor maybe about a week ago, just about some thoughts on the budget and kind of giving you some things to think about. And one of the things that I mentioned and brought up was the 401k contributions to the employees, which I believe are awesome. You know, I think when we can afford it, it's something that is phenomenal for the employees. One of the things that has frustrated me over the last year is that it hasn't come up in conversations in the public format that all North Ogden City employees are eligible for Utah retirements, the Utah retirement system. So I just want to make sure that that is called out and that everybody understands that. So if the city were to temporarily pause a 3% contribution that was added last year, I do agree that it would be difficult to get it back. But if we had a trigger in place that helped the city get that back when economic conditions permitted, I think that that would be wise. I just wanted to kind of give you an idea. So just based off of rough numbers that I've run, say you have an individual that worked for the city for 35 years. 35 years is the required amount of years to work to get full Utah retirement system savings. And that's for non-officers and non-fire department type employees. That's for regular employees. Somebody that ends their career at $50,000, if that's their salary, they are going to make 52% of that salary when they retire. So they'll be able to make approximately $27,000 off the bat. And that's not including the retirement savings that they've been able to stuff away on their own. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. It seems like that's something that is really important to understand for the citizens and for the city council. I hate to even put it that way because I don't want to have a target on my back. Like, I don't appreciate the employees because I think the employees at North Ogden City are phenomenal, but I just think it's fair that that has to be brought up. Thank you.
Thank you, JD. And, you know, I don't think your comments are out of line. I mentioned in some of our previous discussions, I'm aware of some companies that have a same situation. They have a defined benefit plan, which you referred to as the state retirement. I believe anybody, John, you can correct me, anybody hired after July of 2010 is not subject to that same retirement as those hired prior, as I recall, or 2011 in that range.
So the numbers that JD gave us were based on what's called a tier 2 employee, which are those employees you're talking about. Tier 1 employees, they actually can retire with more than a 52% of their salary.
Yes, there was that. JD, just so you know, bringing that up is not out of the sphere. I'm aware of another company that is going to take the entire 6% of their 401k and take a look at that. But
yes, and if I could just say one more thing, Mayor. I work in the private sector, and our company is actually doing okay. We've suffered some small losses, but not very big. But we are being proactive with cost control measures. So a lot of the discretionary budgets are almost completely decimated. I'm sure if business slows in any way that 401k will be on the chopping block. But right now, in the private sector, I am getting a 100% match on 2% of my contributions and 50% on the next 4%. So effectively, I'm getting 4% match in the private sector. So what I'm trying to say is that North Ogden City has a fixed pension, and then they have an additional 6% that is available to them. And so I think that it's a very, very, very rich retirement that they're eligible for. I know that there's an argument that public sector employees don't make as much, and I think that can totally be accounted into this. But just so everyone kind of understands where I'm coming from.
yes, and JD, that's one of the things I think the council in the last year or two has done a good job at, trying to get wages for the city employees up to a market rate. Because I think we need to remember that our employees don't necessarily have to stay in the public sector. They're very talented and they can move to the private sector. So I think we have to always be aware of that fact and try to be competitive in the payment of salaries to our team. So thank you very much for your comments. Very much
Thank
appreciated.
you.
And I would just remind all of us here on the conversation that there are additional triggers that we have to look at if sales tax comes in lower than we anticipate. We hope it doesn't. We hope it comes in better and we can restore some of these things, but there are some other triggers that will be kept out there in the event the property taxes, the sales tax come in less. So I just want to say that there are triggers on both sides, restoration and other things we might have to look at. And those will be on a list that will be available based upon whatever happens either way, up or down. Do we have anyone else, Mr. Call?
So we have someone with the initials RJS, but we don't have their name. So we can either allow them to talk or we could wait for them to put their full name in there.
I think we should wait for them to put their full name in there. That was kind of the rules we started with. We'll give them a chance to do that. Is there anyone else, John?
Not right now.
Let's give this individual a chance to put in their full name.
Mayor, this is Chief Quinney, if I might, while they're doing that.
Okay.
I have a couple comments and I apologize. This kind of intersects the two agenda items. Just kind of things I wanted to point out as far as perspective, being reasonable, just so the citizens out there are aware. Line items that were talked about in the last agenda item, the 94,000 cash out and the $27,000 stipend for politicians. That equates to about $1,200 per employee in a year. The 27,000 equates to about 5,400 per politician stipend. Compare that to what we're asking in the property tax of $35 a household in a year. That $1,200 for an employee, it will take 40 years, even if it's a one-time thing, 40 years to equate to that $35 a year household. So I just want everybody to be aware that there's sacrifices being made on our part and on our part of our employees, and we do understand that we have to tighten our belts. But I don't want that to go unappreciated, especially not just on the employees, but the council and the mayor's part. What their participation in that. And the last citizens' comments. Our competition is not with the public sector. It's not with the private sector. It's with the public sector. I can't compete with the private sector. I have to try and compete with the public sector when it comes to employees, benefits, compensation. But I do appreciate the council and all their comments and everything on that last agenda item. I know you guys appreciate everything, and from what the citizens have been saying, we appreciate everything that you guys can do for us. That's all I have. Thank you.
And Chief, I would make the comment, I think you have to compete with both. Because there's opportunities for qualified people in both the public and the private sector, and we have to be cognizant of that. That we have to be aware of both sides of that equation. And
I agree with that, Mayor. And I think my comments probably are more along the lines of public safety. There's not much private sector that competes with us.
Well, and there's not many jobs that compete with what you guys have to do every day. I've said before, my opinion, our officers and public firefighters they put their lives on the line every day. And we talk about the first responders and what's happening today. So thank you once again. John, I think RJS has put in his full name, Roland J. Schramm. Is that correct? Okay, let's go with him.
Hi, sorry for the confusion. This is Roland J. Schramm. I go by my initials RJ to tell me apart from my father, who is also a Roland and also lives in North Ogden. But I just wanted to say thanks. Yeah, first, sorry for not having my name in there. I think that was left over from the last meeting I was in, and I wasn't sure how to change it.
No problem.
I appreciate you taking my comments. I sent you an email this afternoon and the other council members, and I just like to say thanks for a quick response. I think for most of you, and not that long before time for this meeting this evening, in answer to my questions. And this meeting has greatly expanded my understanding of this process and things you're dealing with, and it's just been very helpful. And so I just wanted to say thanks for that and appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you, RJ. It means a lot to have those comments, so very much appreciated. Thank you so much. I believe that we have another one, Mark.
Yes. So he should be able to unmute himself now.
Can you hear me?
Just barely. Can you get a little closer, Mark?
Yeah, how's this? Okay, yeah, this should be better.
That's better.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment. All I have is 2 words to say, guys. Good job. I think you've addressed the needs of the public, done a good job of looking at all that, addressed alternatives to just simply raising the property taxes. And like I say, good job.
Well, thank you, Mark. That's very kind. Very much appreciated. Don, do we have other comments from the public?
Yes, kind of. Randy Wynn sent me an email message. He's trying to comment but can't. So I'm trying to send him a link to get him into the Zoom meeting. So let me see if I can do that really quick.
Okay.
And there was a comment typed in from JD Dalpaz that says, I would like to say that police force 401ks should not be impacted per his previous email to the city council and mayor.
Any luck with Randy?
I sent him the link. He hasn't popped in yet. It might take him a little while. Oh, Susan Clemens has a comment.
Okay, let's go to Susan. We're waiting.
Okay, we should be able to hear her now.
Susan, are you there? We can't hear Susan. Did she send maybe like chat or something? Because she's unmuted, but we just can't hear her.
Yeah. Let's see if Susan can try and work those issues out. Randy is in now, and so we could hear Randy's comments, and while we see if we can understand Susan's. So Randy, you'll need to unmute yourself. hear Randy's comments, and while we see if we can understand Susan's. So, Randy, you'll need to unmute yourself.
I think I did.
Hear Randy's comments.
Yeah. Can you get closer to your microphone, Randy, so we can hear you better?
Yes. And turn down your background speakers that are on YouTube.
Can you get closer to your microphone, Randy, so we can hear you better?
Yes. And turn down your background speakers that are on YouTube.
Can you get closer to your microphone, Randy, so we can hear you better?
Yes. And turn down your background speakers that are on YouTube.
Can you get closer to your microphone, Randy, so we can hear you better?
Yes. And turn down your background speakers that are on YouTube. Okay, I muted Randy for just a second. So, Randy, if you set yourself up so you can use your phone or whatever you contacted in through Zoom on, and mute the YouTube channel so that you're not getting that back and forth. So I'm going to read Susan's comments. It just says, I wanted to thank the council for thinking outside the box and looking at all areas for cuts. Thanks for looking at the needs of the staff and citizens, as well as looking at the rainy day funds. Good job. Let's see, looking at all areas for cuts. So I think we're still getting some feedback from Randy's YouTube. Let's try it one more time. Randy's YouTube. So there, I think. So Randy, can you hear us?
I can, yes. I've been able to hear you all night. Yeah. Okay, now I got rid of YouTube. I'm trying to re-sign up here.
Okay, well, we can hear you, and you can speak, and then you can go back to YouTube once you're done talking.
Very good. Well, good evening, everybody. I appreciate what you do, and I just wanted to say I think you've made some good decisions tonight. This is a tough year we're facing. I did want to comment on something that Phil pointed out, and that was that rate chart is always kind of deceptive to the public because it makes the city council or whoever it is look really good. But in fact, because of property values, the taxes go up, and people wonder how come the taxes are higher when they said they reduced the rate. Well, Phil explained that, but that chart, it never is very helpful, I think, because of that. One thing that I wanted to just throw out there, and it may not work for a million reasons, but I listened to the complete meeting of the public safety building that was proposed in April. And one thing that occurred to me is that that's a very expensive proposition for a city our size. And I got wondering, we have a Northview Fire Department. Could we not have a Northview Police Department that would share that capital expense? Like we could put a building over on the old utility property and make it for both areas and have a combined. That's just an idea I had that would help share such a large expense and justify a building of that size. And that's just an idea for you guys to mull over. And if it doesn't work out for a million reasons, that's okay. I guess I just thought it's worth listening to anyway. Thank you again for your efforts tonight.
Thanks for your comments, Randy. Really appreciate your interest in the city.
And no more hands or typed in comments I can see, Mayor.
Okay, let's just give a minute to see. We want to hear from the public. Excuse me, if they're out there. So let's just wait a minute to see if anybody clicks in.
Well, we have a comment from Aaron and Kim Christensen.
This is Aaron Christensen, 2428 Barker Parkway. I want to thank you all tonight for your discussion. First of all, as you start getting into things like donating or cutting your, I think somebody called you politicians, and I respect the fact that nobody spoke up and cried foul for calling you politicians. But when you're willing to take a cut in your pay, in putting in perspective things like flower pots and things like that, I mean, that if that would save us 30,000 plus whatever the cost is to water them. In the past, we've said, well, it's negligible, but if we're looking at cutting all those little things out, if you're looking at trying to save benefits for employees or decrease the amount that you're going to have to raise taxes, whether we like the flowers or not, that is something that or other aspects that could be looked at and said, you know what, maybe we take a year off from them. Not taking them away indefinitely, whether you like them or not, but that's another area you could save that that might be a good thing to look at. As an employer, one of the things I've found too with benefits, when people ask my employees what they make, they never ever factor in what their benefits are to them. They only tell somebody what they make on an hourly wage. And so I've even had a lot of employees where we make a match. And when we set up our 401k at our office, the professionals that set it up for us told us that if we did a 4% match, so we match 100% of the first 3% and 50% of the next 2, so they get essentially 100% match if they put 4% in, or at least that's what was explained to me. They said that was very generous. And so it encourages people to to have some skin in the game and put it in there. So yeah, I think that if we're looking at all those things, well, all the benefits have to be taken into account and not just factoring the dollar amount of how much we make at a time, because it's not always recognized even on an employee's level at what a great benefit they have before them. So that's all I've got to say tonight.
Thank you, Aaron. John or Evan, could you clarify this? I believe that the money to purchase those flowers, if I understand, comes out of the RDA fund. It's not out of the general fund. Is that correct?
That is correct.
However, the labor to water those comes out of the general fund, correct?
Correct.
I'm still on the thing as if the money for the purchase comes out of the RDA, and we're saying that's an economic benefit to the city. Why couldn't that be the wages paid out of the RDA also? Seems like if you don't water, the plants are going to die. And if if the assumption is that it's going to bring people into the city, I still think that needs to be looked at. I guess what I'm saying is I still question, is that really a legitimate RDA expense? But that's where it's coming out of currently. Is that correct?
That's right. I would defer to John on the question of where the wages belong.
Yeah, and we probably don't need to answer that tonight. But I just wanted to clarify that fact that the purchase of the flowers, that comes out of the RDA. It's not out of the general fund budget we're talking tonight, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. John, do we have any other comments from the public?
No.
Well, let's move on then to item number 5. Some people might say it's just continuation of the garbage that's gone on so far, but let's talk about the solid waste fund. You caught that, didn't you, Phil?
Sorry, you're reading my lips again. Yes, I did.
All right. Okay, we'll have a discussion on solid waste. Our presenter will be John Call, our city manager and attorney. Mr. Call.
So there were several things that last week there was some confusion on, I think, as well as some additional information the council had asked for. so the question that we're having now, or what's in the staff report is there's a few things we need to talk about. One is what the base rate that we're charging residents will include. Particularly, currently the base rate includes 2 cans, a blue can and a black can. And staff is recommending that we still include both those cans in the base rate. And the logic behind that is with the reduction of recycling that people will need to put more stuff in the trash, so they couldn't go down to 1 can. And then also compounding that is if we were to reduce it so it was only 1 can and we took the extra cans back, we would have no option but to send those cans to the plastic recycler and get about $3 per can value to trade them in. And if we ever wanted to bring recycling back and we needed to buy those 3,000 cans back, we would spend 200. I thought I had it in here. They're about $83. $249,000 is what it would cost to replace those cans because they're about $83 a piece right now. The price fluctuates a little bit based on the cost of plastic. But so we have a couple options. One is to keep everyone with those 2 cans and keep the rates the same, or we could also look at changing the rate program and making it fit. Currently, and that kind of leads into the second topic, the extra cans, we charge $19.33 for an extra can. And with the number of homes that use that, we generate about $188,000 a year. If we were to restructure this, or even the potential with the second can being added, we risk losing a portion of that income, that $188,000 that helps fund the city's trash service. The next item is I've already kind of hit on it, the future of recycling. If we eliminated those extra cans, it would be much harder to start a recycling program again if the council wanted to. And I'm not saying we want to or we don't want to. We do have some capability to store cans, but we figure there's about 100 cans or to 150 that we could store in a way that would meet the stormwater runoff standards. And then the last item is that we are, with bringing the trash in-house, we will need to look at possibly doing some roof extensions over at the old Public Works in the back in the sheds, so that the trucks can be parked under a canopy so they don't get rainwater on them and there again violate the stormwater rules that have been given down in the past couple of years. So there will likely be a capital expense for those. But that capital expense that we do have plenty of money in fund balance for what we anticipate the retrofit cost will be somewhere, I don't know, somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000 to retrofit those canopies. And we've got, I think, close to $300,000 in the fund, maybe $250,000, but we have money to cover that expense. So I also know that you might have other questions, but those were the 4 that were in the staff report. Do you have questions about those items?
Any member of the council have a question on solid waste? John, I think our goal is we were facing up to a $250,000 increase if we didn't take this in-house. So I believe spending 30 to save 250 is not a bad investment. But I think our goal is to not, if we had not brought this in-house, our citizens would have been paying more in their garbage collection. I believe keeping the rates we have in place now with no increase is not out of the question, because recycling could come back. And I think to take all those cans, people are still going to have to dispose of the same things they were disposing in recycle. And so most people are going to use 2 cans anyway. And those that have 2 cans now will probably need 3, because the waste still has to go somewhere, whether it's recycled or not. Is that not?
That is correct, Mayor. We did also talk about the option of the blue cans being an every other week can, and the black cans being an every week can, to just help with the burden on the trucks that are out picking up cans throughout the city.
Yeah, I think that's what's happening now until we can see how this works out, and if recycling comes back. I think that's a reasonable solution. Council, your comments? Councilman Barker?
I spoke with Dave a little bit, and I like that option of every other week on the blue can, and then black cans every week, because then the people that are still having the 2 black cans now will still need them. So we're not losing revenue that way. And then the blue cans will still kind of cover the recycling costs. I'd still like to see about getting some bins out so that people can recycle if they want to. But for the garbage cans, I like every other week for blue cans, and we keep the rates the same.
It's better to increase for 250,000, isn't it, Councilman Barker?
Yeah, it's a lot better.
Any other comments from council on that proposal? Are you raising your hand, Councilman Swanson? All right. Speak to us.
I agree with Councilman Barker. I know in my family, we've had 2 black cans for some time, and now that recycling is gone, we're going to need that 3rd can to handle what we would normally put in the recycling. So I agree. We keep it the way it is, and hopefully something will happen in the recycling market, and that will come back at some point.
Councilwoman Ekstrom, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I think that kind of minimizes just the change in lifestyle that people are used to, right? They're used to, it might be that they still put all of their recycling stuff in, and it really is just, they put it out every other week, and it's no different. So they're paying the same, they're having the same habits. They just, but just instead of having it go to the recycling, which was more expensive, it just goes to the landfill, which most of it was going there anyway. So yeah, that seems like a really good approach.
I think that's an important point that we need to continue to stress. I believe that 75% of what was going into that blue can ended up at the transfer station anyway. So until the recycling comes back and there's a use for some of those things, I do think we need to consider Councilman Barker's comment of those who would still like to, whether it's cardboard or paper or plastic. I think we need to continue to pursue that, John, for those who are really conscientious about doing that.
Okay.
Mayor?
And
Councilwoman Stoker?
On the providing a dumpster or someplace for the residents to recycle their cardboard or whatever, Smith's did that once, or, behind Smith's, they had bins there. And I mean, at first it started out for what it was for, and then just as a caution, I mean, it got to where it was used for more than what it was supposed to be used for. And then it became a big mess and an eyesore, and they did away with it. That's just a comment.
Good point. That's why I'm saying let's at least take a look at it. But the other question is, so what does the city do with all the cardboard they've collected? If we don't have an outlet for that, I know at Associated Food Stores, we've got cardboard coming back we don't know what to do with, because there's not a market for it right now of any significance. So good point, Councilwoman Stoker. Thank you.
so the mayor and council, the recycler did, Recycle Earth just gave us a letter about their new rates that we talked about last week at the $59. If it is clean cardboard, that rate would drop to $45 per ton. So there's a $14 credit if it comes in as clean cardboard. And I think the best way to do that would be a dedicated cardboard bin somewhere, but it would need to have a security camera on it to catch people who were abusing it.
We can look at those options, John, to see what makes sense. I think at this point in time, our conversation is limited to how we're going to use the cans and what the fees charged would be. Do you need anything further, John, to finish the budget for solid waste from us? What do you need?
I don't think so, but just so the council's aware, the plan for equipment will be 2 brand new garbage trucks on a lease, and then an old truck that's about 8 years old to rotate in and out as we're doing maintenance on the new ones. So even though we will have the trucks leased, we'll still do brakes and tires and other things like that to keep them running. And so that will necessitate, rather than having our mechanics come in on the weekends and paying them overtime, the third truck. Plus, if we lose a truck, we can immediately get another one up and running. Plus, we will hopefully come back with an agreement between us and Ogden on a rental rate for trucks in case we had a third or a second truck go down and we needed to borrow one from them. So.
John, does the provider of the trucks also provide the lease rate, or have we put out a proposal for lease?
So they have
What's our negotiation been?
So I think Dave was going to comment about their relationship. So Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, and so Mayor, we've been working really hard with this group. This group is actually has the state contract for leasing for the state of Utah. And they've been working really hard to give us, multiple different options on how many years we're going to lease for, if we're going to do new trucks or old trucks. I mean, they've kind of given us all kinds of options, and I think that they've actually worked very hard because we're on a real time constraint to get these trucks here by July 1. And so they've been able to find us those 2 brand new trucks that other cities weren't able to take. And so yes, I think we're getting the best pricing we could. I mean, and like I said, they're on the state contract. So, I mean, I think we've done our due diligence with that as well. So.
And Dave, I don't mean to in any way detract from that, but I've seen where the state doesn't necessarily have the best rates when it comes to leasing. There seems to be in some cases that private enterprise thinks that public enterprise has all this money. So I think under the time frame, but generally my take is that we need to make sure that we're getting the best deal possible. I understand we're under time constraints here. So good work on getting that put together in such a short period of time. We really appreciate that and all the work your team is doing to make this happen. It's back to our original discussion. The value that our employees can add by coming up with these ideas and putting together is valuable. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Mayor.
And that's everything I've got, Mayor.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Call. Muchly appreciated. Do we have any additional public comments before we go to council and staff comments?
Yes, we've got one from Julie Anderson.
Okay, Julie, name and address again.
Julie Anderson, 940 East, 2600 North. Just want to bring a couple of things to your attention. I've noticed the last little while. I hope you guys can hear me. I had a question about the repair that was done on 2600 right there by the barn, Chambers Barn. It is really bad. It is more of a speed bump and stuff like that. And so I just want to make sure that we get that fixed because a lot of people don't realize it. I think if their first time down the road or they haven't been down in a while. We saw a trailer go down there the other day and he went over that bump and I thought he was going to lose his trailer. And it kind of scared him. You can see the driver's face like, what happened? Because you can see it, but it doesn't look that bad. So I just was hoping that maybe we could get that repaired.
Dave has been out beating people up and threatening them, and it should be fixed tomorrow morning or tomorrow. Correct, Dave?
Dave
Yeah,
is
tomorrow.
awesome.
No, we've been working hard, and Justin, our inspector, has really been, he's been on top of them, and it was a bad deal, but we're getting it fixed.
Well, thanks, Dave. Second
Yeah.
thing
ahead,
I have is also they started digging a basement on 850 East, just north of the old Powell White House. And I don't remember anything being approved for that. I don't know if it's part of the subdivision, but I don't remember anything being approved for that. But they actually did the work on Sunday. So all day Sunday, we listened to backhoes and trailers and all kinds of things. And I mean, we don't live that close to it, but we could hear it in our yard. And so I'm wondering if it's against the code to do construction on Sunday. What is our responsibility as a citizen to make sure that everybody feels comfortable with what's going on? And if this was approved, if anybody knows.
The subdivision, those lots have been approved. It was included in that. I'm trying to remember the name of it, but basically the Powell property subdivision.
Yeah.
But if there is construction activity like that on a Sunday, if you call the non-emergency dispatch line, the
Okay.
police are the ones who will handle that.
Okay, thank you, John. So when was that approved? Has it been a while? I mean, I thought they had some issues with families not wanting to give their approval for that. So I'm just wondering.
It was approved with the original subdivision, and then it was divided into the two phases. The one phase with the lots on 850, and then the other phase, the stuff behind the Powell home, but out where the barn and everything is.
Okay, all right, thank you. I just wanted some. And my last one is with the change to the orange, our posse is looking to start up, practicing again. And they understand the guidelines, only 20 people. But I just wanted to make sure that it was okay for them to do that. I don't want them to get there. They are going to observe the 6 foot distancing and stuff like that. But we want to make sure that we're not breaking any rules when we do it. So I don't know if Tiffany's still on the line, or if John, you can answer that question. But I just want to make sure before they start doing it that, they don't get up there and then they get yelled at.
How many are in the posse?
Well, there's actually 30 kids in the posse, but she's going to divide them up into 50 groups of 15.
Okay.
And one group will come from 6 to 7, and the next group will come from 7. They're still trying to work that out. And they have told them, that the problem is we have parents that come. So that's the thing that she's worried about. Usually it's one parent, but if you have 15 kids, you're looking at a lot more than 20 people. So she's trying to work that out. So she wants to make sure that she's following the correct guidelines.
I think, Julie, that in the spirit of the law, if you were making sure the parents were staying separate and not in the arena or hanging around the fence, so maybe they could be up on the hill watching.
Okay.
And social distancing. I think if you made it clear there were 2 separate groups,
Okay.
that would probably be in accordance with it. And the only thing I'd probably also recommend is maybe not 6 to 7 and 7 to 8, but see if you could put the half hour in between so they can load and unload.
Yeah, I think
help.
that's, she's trying to work out the logistics of all of this. All of the posties are right now, because most of them have an average of 25 and up. And so they're trying to work out the logistics on it. But she wanted to make sure that, if the parents come, do they have to stay at their trailers? She just wants to make sure she's following all the guidelines. So that I'll give her that information and make sure that they follow those guidelines. So thank you. And again, thank you for your time tonight. Blake, you've been sat in the dark all night.
Okay, next time.
You look a little scary. No, I'm just joking. But thank you guys. I know this hasn't been an easy work session for you guys, but I appreciate the time that you've put in. And when it comes to the money back for the $3, I had some questions on that, but then you answered them as we moved on later. So I don't need to bother you with that. So maybe just ask the citizens their feelings on it. You know, make a few phone calls, see how they feel, see what you get back from them. I think that would be awesome. So thank you.
John, did you see JD's comment on chat?
Not yet. I can read it now though. So JD Dalpez says, I thought the subdivision was only on a preliminary approval as well. If they would like, they can call the planning department, and they can give them the exact dates of those approvals. Or if they email me at jcall@nogden.org, so that's jcall@nogden.org, I'll put them in touch with the right folks. And then we have a comment from Brenda Ashdown.
Welcome, Brenda. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I would like to say thank you for all of your attention to details tonight. I appreciate that. I have a couple of questions. Was my understanding when they built the new city shop that the old city shop property was going to be looked at being sold? Is that not an option anymore?
I can answer that, Mayor, if you want.
Sure.
So we have looked at what it could be sold as well as been talking about the needs of the various departments. It is still somewhat up in the air. That I know the council, I believe the council discussed it maybe 2.5 years ago. I think at the time we had an offer on the table. I think I feel like it was something like 75 or 80 grand an acre, and the council was not interested at that point. But there is also the option of selling a portion of it and retaining a portion depending on department needs as well. So if you want, council, we could set that for a future discussion item. I would probably recommend at least let Evan and the department heads get through the budget, and so we could talk about it in June or something like that if you would like.
Okay, my reason for that question was if that's where you're going to put the garbage trucks, then it's not going to be an option to be sold, right? Because it will be needed for that. My other comment on that is as I drive past there are camp trailers in there, and I'm curious as to why there are camp trailers in there, and if that area couldn't be used for the garbage trucks without needing to make more roof space. Then I'm going to beat my dead horse again and ask where my trees are.
So I can answer the two questions about the existing. Those trailers are the FEMA trailers that are for emergency use. They're essentially offices that inside they're not actual camp trailers. But they do look like them from the outside, as well as there actually is some equipment stored over there by Weber Search and Rescue as well, Weber County. And that's where I think we were talking about modifying the roofs to make sure they covered the garage or the garbage trucks entirely. We need to get some measurements and then just see if we're in compliance or not. So we're kind of just in the initial phase of figuring out. They might work as they are, or we might need to add some metal and roofing to just make sure that we're meeting the standards the DEQ has given us. And then I think Dave could probably answer the question about the trees. I know that they have a plan, but
sorry, John.
Thanks, John.
Yes, so we've had 3 different contractors come out, well, landscapers come out over the last little week. So we should be having it's in this budget year, so we'll have it done before July 1 is the plan. It'll be great. We'll have it grassed. You'll have the trees up. The rest of the landscaping will be all done.
Okay, thank you. I was just wondering if that was going to be affected by the current situation that we're in.
nope, we still have it in the budget. And yeah, like I said, we've had contractors working on it with us.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Brenda. Any other comments from the public, John?
Not that I can see.
Okay. We have council, mayor, and staff comments. Do we have any comments, further comments from the council this evening? Seeing none, do we have any comments from the mayor tonight? And yes, we do have a couple. John can, by the way, Dave, I received a email from a citizen. I guess we've got a bad patch job up on 2100 also where the developers cut through there. Can you check out on that one?
Yes, sir. I was going to actually, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Dave.
I was just going to say, I was going to mention that as well. So that is where they have cut in the service lines for each of the new homes and those kind of things. Justin has also been working really hard on those ones, and we should have those patched by the end of the week as well.
Okay, thank you. And then let's don't forget the dead end sign that was requested to get back to them. And then, John, I do believe I'm getting a lot of questions on the widening project. I don't know if we have put that out anywhere on our pages that that's being delayed till next spring. But I'm getting a lot of questions on the status of the road widening project. And then could you give us an update on the property on 2700 North, where the retention basin was?
Yeah, so we will add that to the webpage, but for council's information, we've made offers on all but 4 of the properties. And several of those folks have agreed in writing, and some have already closed and been purchased. But we are close on pretty much all the properties to being wrapped up. Right now, the plan is to bid the project in November when UDOT bids their intersection widening. And then we will hope to catch kind of this uncertainty for road contractors right now, and we're hoping that we'll get some good numbers and start first thing in the spring. And so that's the 450. On the 2700 basin, we have not received any inquiries about that property since the council talked about it, except for the group who submitted the offer would like to. They had actually talked about, it would be nice if the council would give them a counter offer and maybe work towards a settlement, or not a settlement, but an agreed upon contract on that property. And so it's it'd be good to find out if the council wanted to talk about that. We would do that in a closed session because we're talking about the strategy of selling property at some future date if you wanted to.
Have we found out who that property belongs to, which fund yet, John?
Yes,
okay.
Kind of.
Yes, kind of, maybe.
So it was purchased in 1978, which was the year that the city started the sewer fund, the stormwater fund. And at that point, it appeared that the money for the purchase of the property either came from a federal grant or from the sewer fund, the actual sewer fund. So but then there's a nuance that later on in our capital assets, it is listed as a general fund asset in, I believe, 1997. And Jamie and Evan and I just need to get together and talk about what we think, or where we think the documents prove that it belongs, and then give that information to you, Mayor, so you can see if you think the paper trail works as well. Otherwise, I think the assumption will be that it's a stormwater asset if it's not clearly another asset, because it's kind of all over the map.
Okay, thank you, John. Appreciate that very much. Staff, any comments from you this evening?
You hit on the items that I wanted to bring up, which was the road expansion in the property.
I have a comment, Mayor.
Yes, Evan.
Just a reminder, we have our tentative budget approval scheduled next Tuesday, May 12th. And then we have a public hearing on the budget scheduled May 26th. We had originally planned to adopt the final budget in June, but with a proposal to increase property taxes, the final approval will be deferred until August when we go through the truth in taxation process. So that's just an outlook for the rest of the budget year.
Thank you, Evan. Appreciate the good work you're doing on that. I know you've been working hard, so thank you very much. Any other comments from staff? We still have some of our department heads with us. And Annette, any comments you'd like to make before we close the meeting? Okay, then we'd be looking for a motion to adjourn. But before we do, I do have another comment. Thank you, council, for your diligent work and trying to balance out all aspects of our unique and unprecedented situation. I know that everyone's given it some serious thought. So thank you very much. And thank you, Councilman Swanson, for fulfilling your assignment with such diligence in being the liaison with our finance department and on the budget. So thank you to the city employees and our department heads for all you do. I know sometimes you think it's a thankless job, but no, we appreciate it. So with that, we'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Mayor, I move that we adjourn.
Okay. Councilwoman Ekstrom, do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Cheryl Stoker, Councilwoman Stoker. You so many titles living so close to me. You got so many. So with that, any objections to adjourning? If not, we'll see you next week. Have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Good night.